Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, September 17th meeting of the Select Board. We know the meeting has been properly warned because we entered into executive session this evening at 5:15 p.m. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the September 3rd meeting.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. I do have chair's remarks this evening. They are important and they are longer than I usually would have, and so I have them written down and I will be referring to my notes beginning now. I want to take this time to extend a sincere thank you to Brattleboro's police officers for the excellent frontline work that they are doing to address the impacts of poverty in our community without criminalizing it or the people who suffer from it. The humanity and compassion of the officers in their person-to-person interaction with people who are struggling in our community is frankly amazing, and it is stressful and it is against the normal way that policing is done. The relationships formed are intimate and built over time with the folks they interact with the most. The department's leadership in reducing the use of trespass notices and other revolving door methods of enforcement is inspiring and shows a real understanding of systemic barriers and restorative justice. We know that the officers face criticism every day from mainstream individuals who want visible poverty to be removed from our public spaces. I can only imagine the stress and discouragement that causes to people who are doing this kind of very high-pressure work every day. We are grateful for the officers' resilience and perseverance in addressing these situations within the boundaries of what is allowed by the United States Constitution and the Vermont court system. For instance, people who have no housing cannot legally be removed from public spaces unless there is a shelter to which they can be directed. You can Google that. It is a Ninth Circuit Court ruling that started out west and has already been upheld in Burlington, with a financial impact to the town. If anything, our public spaces at this point may need to be assessed for future camping needs that are actually safe. When crimes are committed and an arrest is made, a lot of work goes into that people do not see. A lot of coordination with other law enforcement agencies, some of which might not be that pleasant to work with. And yet, the legal system, meaning the judiciary system, the court system, often releases people within a few hours, even after months and months and months of work has been done. I can only imagine this is just as demoralizing as having people come up to them on the street saying they're not doing their job. These releases can lead to the misconception that the PD is doing nothing, but that is not true. I want the community to know that the police department acts in accordance with the Select Board's direction and within the applicable laws. And to our police department, I say, keep up the awesome work. Thank you for what you bring to our community. What you do every day is not lost on me, and I would dare say is not lost on any of us sitting up here tonight. I also want to quickly mention that some of us who are on social media may have noticed the post from Sergeant Bissett, I believe, from the Berlin, Vermont Police Department, who I believe this weekend purchased sleeping bags, collected sleeping bags for the 43 homeless people, 19 of which were noted in one night in their town of population 2,887 as of the 2010 census. 43 homeless people. And their police department was quite clear about their refusal to criminalize poverty. And so I guess I'd say we're in good company, considering Brattleboro sits at a very uncomfortable 23.6%, or 1 of every 4.2 residents that live below the poverty line, the state line being 11.4%. With that, I would ask, are there managers' comments?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Are there other members of the Select Board who would like to make comments or committee reports?
No, thank you.
The Diversity Committee meets on Thursday, the first time since the spring.
Awesome.
Packed agenda.
Very good.
2 quick comments. there's going to be an informational, sort of a kickoff meeting at the Latches Theater Monday the 24th for COSU, which is the Windham County Consortium on Substance Abuse.
Tuesday, the
Substance.
24th.
What did I say?
Monday's the 23rd.
Oh, sorry about that. Tuesday the 24th. And I think it's at the unfortunate time of 10 a.m. to 12. But there's a reason for that. There's going to be discussions going on afterwards at Turning Point. So if you don't know, this is a consortium of many different groups, 14 in total, I think, that are coming all together to address substance misuse in our community and throughout Windham County. So that's something you can check out and learn a lot more about. I'm hoping BCTV will be there, but we can't always assume that.
I'm getting a nod.
Getting a nod, good.
This is the
Great.
24th at 10 a.m.?
It is, yeah. I think it had to be moved, so that's, despite my confusion, I think that was the only one move it made from the 17th to the 24th now. The only other comment I wanted to make is I wasn't here at the last meeting, and the last meeting is when there was a little acknowledgement of Martha O'Connor's passing. I just wanted to add my personal grief that I experienced while I was on vacation, unfortunately, and I just want to say that I wouldn't be sitting here without Martha's encouragement at several points in me trying to decide if I should jump into this for the community. And I'm just incredibly impressed by both Martha and Tim's contributions to our community, and wish Kate and the other kids a lot of love about that. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It still kind of stings, and we're several levels removed, so, yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, at this point, I'm going to make a comment. We have a really packed agenda again, and so I am going to try, every day we strive to be a better version of ourselves. I'm going to try to be as open to public comment as I ever can be, while still saying that we need to keep things within the bounds of the time we have allotted with our interpreters and just in general. Having said that, I will now open the floor for public participation. This is your opportunity to speak about something that is not on tonight's agenda. George.
Hello, I'm George Harvey. I'm a resident of Brattleboro, town meeting rep. I want to make a criticism of the select board, and I want this to be heard as a positive criticism. And I'm going to start out by pointing out that in 1933, Prohibition ended, and the federal government passed a law that made it possible to make wine in the household, but not beer. And the reason that that law was what it was, and it remained on the books for 45 years, was because of a misplaced comma. The beer would have been allowed if the comma hadn't been misplaced, but it sat there for 45 years. And for that reason, everything that comes before any body, legislative body, whatever body, has got to be crafted well. Now, what I want to comment on is the vote that was taken a couple of times ago, several weeks ago, on the climate declaration. And what happened here was that a group of young people made the request.
George?
Yes.
That's on the agenda tonight. It hasn't
No,
been voted on.
last term, the last time. I
We ever
want to
actually
comment
voted
on the way
We've never
that was.
voted on it.
We didn't vote.
We've
Okay,
never voted on it.
you didn't vote.
Because we wanted it to come back in front of the full
Yes,
board.
I understand. The comment is still valid, though.
Okay.
After that meeting, I went out and I heard what the kids were saying. They had come to you and they had said, we want a climate declaration. We believe this is an existential crisis. And what had happened was that went before the board. It was not voted on. I'm sorry, I was wrong.
Okay.
But nonetheless, they looked like they were in shock. And I think the reason why they looked like they were in shock was because you were looking at this from the point of view of something that was coming before the select board that had to be right. It had to be well crafted. They were looking at it from the point of view of children who were coming to you and saying existential threat, which means children came to you and said, our lives are being threatened. And the response was, I can't vote for this paper's a mess. Which to them meant, although it's valid in the select board process, to them it means, okay, you've said your life is in danger, we're telling you your term paper failed. And I think they really were in shock because of that. And I want to point out that 5 days ago, a story came out of a peer-reviewed publication coming out saying, our society is going to collapse in 30 years if we don't deal with this. This is a position that scientists are getting into. And I will point out that Stephen Hawking said he believed that the world was going to lose all life. This is possibly the biggest issue that will ever be before this body. And I would hope that as you deal with this, it will be treated with care, because you're dealing with children here.
Thank you, George.
Thank you very much.
Further comments about items, and I think I was a little lax there because really that should have waited until the item, but I'd like to have comments about items that are not at all listed on tonight's agenda. Nick.
Nick Nickerson, 67 years in the land of cotton, 5 years in the land of the Green Mountains. I want to say that Randy and I did not collude on this statement, if I can get through it.
What?
Yes, but you may notice this. This is something that phobics use to divert their anxiety by a little bit of pain. Very, very common technique.
So intrigued.
We'll see if it works.
Okay.
There are designated areas in Brattleboro that I believe are melodramatic and patronizing. These areas are designated safe areas, and by that designation blatantly and falsely say that the rest of Brattleboro is not safe. The select board, the police, and the people of Brattleboro work to keep Brattleboro safe, and they are largely successful. Brattleboro is not perfect, and neither are these safe spaces, especially if people started congregating there. To paraphrase a president who will probably make most of you feel unhappy, I want to say, Mr. Signhanger, tear down those smug signs. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick and I did collaborate on that. No, I'm just kidding. That was good. I want to take some of the credit.
You would have said it better.
It does. Further comments about things that are not on tonight's agenda? Okay, then I am going to go ahead and I will entertain a motion to become liquor commissioners.
So moved.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful. We are liquor commissioners, and our first item is third-class liquor license renewals.
So Hillary is here if you'd like to take a deeper dive
Okay.
into this. But as she has laid out well in her memorandum to you dated September 11th, this is new because the state legislature in the most recent session added third-class licenses to the list of licenses that are addressed by local liquor commissioners. Third class are those that are issued for establishments to sell hard alcohol, not beer or wine. Beer and wine is second class if it's, let me get this wrong, second class to be sold to take out, and first class to be consumed on the premises. Those are both beer and wine. Third class is for hard liquor that is sold to be consumed on the premises. And so what's before you this evening with staff's recommendation for approval and a full explanation from Hillary about the background is for 4 establishments in Brattleboro to receive your approval for a 6-month Class 3 license, or third class license. The reason it's a 6-month license is the third class licenses are more expensive, and establishments are allowed to buy those in 6-month increments instead of in 1-year increments. When you see the full slate of renewals for first, second, and third class next early spring, late winter, you'll have a larger number of third-class licenses on that list.
Okay.
But for tonight, including the representation in the backup that none of these have any violations in the last 12 months, what's before you is a 6-month seasonal third-class license for Arkham, Echo, Flamingo Diner, and New England House, and we recommend approval.
Great, thank you very much. Are there members of the board that have questions or comments on these 4 establishments looking for 6-month third-class liquor licenses?
I have a comment.
What is it?
I just want to point out to everybody who's watching Money, which we are as well, that unlike the first and second class licenses, and you can back me up on this, Hillary, if I get it wrong, the third class, even though we are now tasked with approving at each of our approval processes, the town does not make money from the third class liquor licenses, even though they are the most expensive.
Not yet. So that's something
yet.
that will be further discussed with VLC and with the legislators
Also looking
for
at
the upcoming session.
a representative hiding back there. Thank you.
Great. Further questions or comments from members of the board? Are there questions or comments from members of the public on these 6-month third-class liquor licenses for Arkham, Echo, Flamingo Diner, and New England House? Okay. With no more questions or comments, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve 2019 seasonal third-class liquor licenses for Arkham, Echo Restaurant and Lounge, Flamingo Diner, and New England House as presented.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
And we are approved.
Thank you.
Very good. We now move on to first-class liquor license for Best Vittles, Inc., doing business as Pudge and T-Bones.
We have a representative
Do
present.
elaborate, yes. Do you want to come over to our fancy table for elaboration? Curious to hear more. Oh, I see. Hi.
Hi.
You can just state your name and
Sure.
your business.
Bruce Bonnet, Best Vittles, currently under the name of Green Mountain Market and Deli, the DBA. We're changing to Pudge and T-Bones, DBA, and changing the license to a first class.
Okay. Great.
Want to tell us a little bit about your business while you're here? You got a huge television audience.
Well, we sell barbecue, pizzas, home-cooked foods, and we have a full grill menu with everything is made on premises. We currently sell some grocery items, including beer and wine, to take out the second-class license. And we've had a lot of customers say that they would enjoy sitting and, drinking a beer while ordering a pizza or something. So that's why our food business is doing well. So we're looking to expand and we've had Pudge and T-Bones barbecue for quite some time. So we're going to expand more on that.
I like your pizza.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Would you like to talk about your name?
That's what I was going to ask.
My personal name or?
No, the Pudge and
The
T-Bones.
Pudge and T-Bones.
Yeah.
Okay, Pudge and T-Bones is nicknames, high school nicknames,
Oh,
for two brothers.
Got it.
nice.
Nice.
Enough said.
And I'm not going to tell you which is
Nope.
which.
We got. Are there further questions or comments from the board on this license? Are there comments or questions from anybody in the community on this first-class liquor license? Okay, then I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve a first-class liquor license to Best Vittles, Inc., doing business as Pudge and T-Bones.
Excellent. Tim has made that motion. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can have a beer. Oh, you do?
All right.
Okay. Nice.
Snuck that one in there.
That's good. Know your market. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn as liquor commissioners.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I would now entertain a motion to convene as Water and Sewer Commissioners.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. We are Water and Sewer Commissioners, and our first item and only item of business is to authorize the purchase of a replacement generator through the Department of Public Works.
So as is set forth in a memorandum from Dan Tyler, the Superintendent of Highway and Utilities, dated September 11th, the generator that had been providing backup power at the Public Works headquarters, which is headquarters both to the Public Works operation and our town utilities operation, which is why this is a water and sewer utilities item. That generator had come from Vermont Yankee. It was a used generator that, when it was first installed, it had run its course and failed recently. We had it inspected or diagnosed to see about the extent of the damage and what a repair would look like, and the cost was prohibitive. And so the department worked with A.L. Tyler, who had done the assessment of the electrical demand that a new generator would need to supply, to get pricing from 3 separate providers who could meet that demand, could provide a 35 kilowatt generator. And the prices that were provided were from Generac at $19,365, Kohler at $23,550, and Caterpillar $35,535. And so the recommendation is to award the contract for this generator to Generac in the amount of $19,365.
Thank you, Peter. Questions or comments from members of the board on this generator and this proposal?
Yeah. How long will this generator last for? Like, what's the lifespan of a new one?
Most newly purchased generators will last for decades.
Right.
They're run occasionally just to make sure that they are operational, and then in emergency situations when we need to power the facilities.
Right. Do you know if they looked into the possibility of battery storage rather than a diesel generator?
I don't know that. And
Or
if the board would
or
like us
natural gas.
to examine that, then we can do that and bring this back for October 1st.
Does the generator require an air permit?
I don't believe so. This is replacing one that was existing, but again, that's a detail we could check if you'd like to bring that in back.
Yeah.
Definitely like to explore both those options.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a lot of experience with generators and off-grid solar and batteries, and I would suspect that there's a lot of problems with that idea.
Let's find out.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that battery storage systems are very heavy on the earth themselves, and maintaining them is a lot of work as well.
Thanks for that.
Thanks for that. I think we'd like to see this item come back.
Sure, will do.
Excellent, thank you. So because we're having the item come back, there will be no vote, so the vote I will take instead is to adjourn as Water and Sewer Commissioners.
So,
Excellent. We are now a regular Board of Select
Can we
persons.
vote on that?
Oh, yeah, all those in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Our next item is what we're all waiting for. Unfinished business is the request for declaration of climate emergency. Who would like to come to our fancy table to begin this conversation? If you feel like you would like to come, but you don't think there's enough chairs, there are enough
We have
chairs,
more
you can just
chairs.
pull them around.
And they're comfy.
They are.
You better.
I don't know what we used to have. Okay, so I would have whoever is going to be the first speaker, make sure that you introduce yourselves.
Okay?
I would also like to remind us that we've done this this is our third time now, I believe. And so I would invite us to offer new information, because as this being our third time hearing it, and most of us have read it more than 3 times as we're working to make our decisions, I believe a reiteration of already known facts could prove to not be that useful. We've read the climate emergency several times. We've talked about it 3 times. We've had a protest, which I was completely in favor of. So I would hope that anything that comes forward tonight is new information. Otherwise, you could give a brief summary and we could move on to talking about the vote. That really needs to happen.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
Madam Chairwoman, could we have a member of the board read the proposal for the public?
Is there a member to read the, I think we would read it if we approve it. What I'd like you to do is give a summary, a brief summary to anybody that might be watching about how this came about and what you're looking to do. And then we're going to move the conversation into discussion so that we can finally take the vote that these young people have been waiting for quite a long time.
You don't think it's improper to have the meeting without reading the proposal?
No, I do not.
Yeah, I have a short opening statement.
Oh,
I'm not sure it counts as old information.
yeah. And speak right into that microphone, especially with the AC on.
Right. My name is Mark Tully. I live up the street. I do some contract work for Brattleboro Common Sense, which has brought this. I'm usually not up front. I don't really like it here, but I did ask to be here. Here's the basic thing. The resolution before you asks you to declare a state of emergency in relation to the crisis.
Yep.
And it asks you to do such a declaration in the same sense that a state or federal government would do it, and that is a declaration that activates government processes to expedite action on the crisis, not just a statement. The emergency mechanism it establishes is monthly meetings to take these things up. It's there to incubate and vet local climate rescue measures to eventually bring before this board. It's not a decision-making body, so it's not really a layer of bureaucracy. It's like an all-purpose public space for dealing with these kind of measures. It can serve as a hearing or a workshop, whatever is necessary at that time. Having a dedicated space for these issues expedites action. You know, a lot of the agendas here at this meeting are packed with climate rescue measures, and they last for 4 or 5 minutes. It would alleviate both the pressure on regular select board agendas, but would also give a break to people who have climate business before the board who don't have to wait to the next 5-hour select board meeting to do it. I also want to mention this action will put Brattleboro right at the forefront of the climate rescue movement as far as local municipalities go. The Climate Mobilization, an international group who tracks these declarations, lists that outside of major cities in California, there are only 6 local municipalities that have passed declarations that have a government mechanism attached to it. That's only 6. From the Mississippi to the Atlantic, it's only Northampton and 2 towns in Connecticut. Now, I don't say that to appeal to a sense of status. I say that because the people in this town are clearly into doing work at the forefront of this movement, and what you have before you is the forefront of this movement. That's what's important to me. I have to say on behalf of the organization that the heart of this is its call for unity across all sectors of society, across demographics, across political ideologies. And a quick example I want to give you is that in this town, the folks who live in the floodplains of this town are about as frontline as you can get in the climate crisis in this town. There may be folks in that floodplain who do not believe that extreme weather events are caused by climate change. They might not even believe in the climate crisis altogether. But they do know they're one extreme weather event away from personal catastrophe. They have the best insights on their situation and what might help their situation. And since the current forums for bringing climate rescue ideas and measures forth are the climate activist movement, we're a pretty specific socio-political niche. And not everybody is going to be comfortable coming to and really not gain much traction in that niche. And so all these voices that are not being heard, and by establishing a public forum where anybody can come forward, no matter how isolated their ideas are, they are welcome equally as folks who come in with 100 people backing them up. And I wanted to stress that. Closing, establishing a regular public meeting sets an environment of political equality in fact, an apolitical space to work on common projects together. Reports, ideas, and proposals can come forth regardless. I said that, how isolated they are, and this expedites access to government processes, and in that way expedites a broad range of interest, the activist movement, folks who are in danger, the business community, which is not a group of voices that is being heard equally altogether in this town.
So for somebody who doesn't like to be in the front, I don't think I could have requested a better summary than what you just gave. That's exactly what I wanted to hear in your own words. Thank you very much. That's for me, much better than me reading something. I wanted to hear it reiterated in somebody's words from the committee. Okay. What is the pleasure from this board? Would we like to hear comment, or would we like to talk amongst ourselves and then hear comment?
I wonder if there's anything that the folks at the table want to add.
Is there anything you want to add to what Mark had to say? Yeah.
I was wondering, I do have some comments, but I don't know if they'd be better placed in the public, the public
You're
discussion.
sitting at the table, you're welcome to
say your
speak
name,
right
please?
there. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to point out that last time I was a little bit confused by George Harvey's statement about us treating this declaration as if you would treat like a proposal of children, because I think we really have put a lot of thought and effort into this, and it's not something that we just sort of decided to do because we're impulsive and young, because clearly the age group of this group isn't exactly on the younger side. But so I'd like to make a comment about that. I'd also like to point out that last time I think there were some comments about whether or not the select board should be the one to make the decision on this declaration, and I think it absolutely should be. The select board's decisions carry weight throughout the town. They have made decisions for people in the past, like in, when was it, 2003, there was a climate resolution passed for the town. And then another one on the Patriot Act in 2004. And I think that just because if you guys have concerns about maybe it somehow being undemocratic, I'd like to point out that passing this is absolutely democratic. It fosters a sense of community and public participation in what obviously affects the whole public. I'd also like to point out that last time, I think that maybe we weren't rattled so much that it was not supported, but just that in the way that it was sort of pushed to the side, I think it didn't feel like there was a space for a space to receive and also reply to comments. It sort of felt like we were told oh, we don't have time for this, so therefore we will not debate it and we will not pass it tonight, which I felt was frustrating, but I really appreciate being able to be here tonight. There was one other thing. I think that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Can I ask you to introduce yourself now?
I'm so sorry.
That's okay, it's fine.
I'm Maya McNeil. I'm in District 2 in Brattleboro.
Awesome, thank you, Maya. You wanting to speak?
My
Kurt?
name's Kurt Dimes. I live in Brattleboro. Briefly about the origin of the declaration. It is not solely the work of Brattleboro Common Sense, but in large measure it has several clauses which are required by the Climate Mobilization, which is a coalition, an international coalition, and I myself collaborated with people in England, and I don't know where else, and people in Brattleboro by a Google Doc. And so it's got lots of these phrases are not just our own work, but a collaboration of local and international climate activists. Other thing I'd like to mention is about the feeling that Brattleboro has, and it's common with other people. People are very upset with their government. I am not any more upset with Brattleboro's government than any other government. And I want to apologize for if we gave that impression at our previous disruptions here. I think everybody around the world is paralyzed or nearly paralyzed by this terrible issue, this terrible crisis that faces us. That's nothing, no shame on Brattleboro or on the select board if we're all paralyzed like you. With that said, I think the paralysis has to be addressed by this declaration. If you consider it, as I have come to consider it, as a measure of public health, the health of our, I'm sorry, I'm just very upset about this.
Take a breath.
I've been on the street most of the last few months, double time every day, every week. And I have been crying on the shoulders of strangers, and strangers have been crying on my shoulders. There is a terrible, terrible need for us to take action on this. There is a proliferation of articles about anxiety and sleep deprival and depression among children. And it's because we as a society do not have a beginning on the problem. On one side, all we grown-ups and governments are saying, oh, this is terrible. Oh, it looks like the world's about to end. And on the other side, we're doing nothing. That is terribly, terribly frightening for children to see their parents and their government paralyzed. On the other side of that issue, what do we do? The climate crisis, the climate declaration gives us a way to make laws ourselves. The people, not just the government, but the people can come to the hearings and make just temporary laws. That is, advise the government, and you, the select board, would then make their suggestions into temporary emergency ordinances. They can only be valid for 30 days. This, I think, also has two good benefits. It will give the people the feeling of a beginning. And secondly, if it gets to be a thing, Brattleboro could be very well benefited by becoming a kind of incubator of climate remedies. That would be awesome. That would really be very Brattleboro. And thank you.
You're welcome. I generally don't speak first. I try to speak last, but I need to speak if that's okay with my fellow board members.
Sure.
I am going to be inclined to vote for this. And I'm going to be inclined to vote for this because I spent a lot of time thinking about how it must feel to be between the ages of 18 and 23. As a parent, I'm already terrified of what my children, who are ages almost 5 and almost 7, because our birthday's in like 2 months and I never know what to say about their age, are going to grow up in. And I want people who are between the ages of 18, 25, I want everybody, but I'm going to specifically say that tonight, to understand the fight that's ahead of them and how their participation in the democratic process is going to be different than their parents. And I am now going to say very firmly that for those of us who have been in this kind of work for a long time, have a heavy burden on our shoulders that when we are mentoring young activists into young legislatures, to make sure that we are educating exactly how to navigate our system. I'm all for our system breaking, but right now it's there. And so when we're talking about things, I want to make sure that what is actionable at the state level is brought to the state. Because when I sit here and I see items that aren't actionable here, it makes me cringe. Doesn't mean I'm going to vote against it, but it sends up a red flag. Some things are actionable at the state level, some at the federal, some at the municipal. And since there's only either 9 or 11 Dillon's Rule Estate in this country, falling behind a national charter or a national movement, it is not guaranteed that they're going to take Dillon's Rule States into account when most of this country is a home rule state where municipalities have much more flexibility over what they can control. And we are not one of those. When we are mentoring children to come and fight in ways that they have to fight we need to be able to direct them exactly. And I will tell you that the writing of this resolution and the way that it was worded is the reason that we are here for a third time. Having said that, I fully support the actions of our youth. I fully supported the die-in. Had I known it would happen, I would have not been getting ice cream with my toddler up on the common. I would have been laying right in the road and being removed with you. But we need to watch the way that we are mentoring children, because they are going to navigate a political landscape that is terrifying. With that, I will ask the board if the board would like to make comments at this time, or if the board would like to direct to this moment of 10 to 15 minutes to the community to make their comments.
I vote for
I'd
the
like to-
community.
I'd like to make our comments first. So, there you go.
Somebody else say something.
Are there folks here who would like to speak about this? Maybe raise your hands. We'll see how
Yeah,
many
that
we
might
are.
be good.
One,
We got 2 raised hands.
two.
3.
Okay.
David, do you feel okay
4.
since it's...
Yeah, I'm ready.
Could we set a time limit?
We are setting a time limit of 10 to 15 minutes for public participation.
Together or each person?
All together. All together. Days of the interpreters.
So if the first person takes 10 minutes, the other people.
Yes, so be conscious of, if
Maybe
you are
we can-
somebody who tends to speak a lot, know that you are taking time from the other speakers. Who would like to go first? Franz. Are you the timekeeper, Daniel?
I'm going to set a 3-minute timer, Franz, if that's okay.
He's the mouth.
Franz Reichsman, live in Brattleboro. I just would like to ask for clarification on what specific actions does this resolution commit the select board to take?
Excellent. The specific actions that it commits the select board to take is to strive for zero emissions across all sectors of the economy by 2030, and that this effort be observed and reported by a sustainability coordinator or other appropriate officer of the town. I read these out of order. And the other action I want to read, number 12, thank you, is that the select board shall warn monthly hearings of the people for proposing remedies for this climate crisis, and shall enact emergency ordinances per Charter Article 4, Section 6AA to test the proposals arising from those hearings. So basically, we would enact that we need to have emergency meetings, and those meetings would be used for the discussion of climate crisis. Those are the 2 actual actionable items. Okay. Further comments?
And that the meetings would then result in emergency ordinances.
Well, yeah,
That's
If they were
the,
good
that's,
ideas.
if they were,
ideas
if stuff
that
came
make
out of
sense.
them, yeah,
They might. They
that
could.
rose to that.
all right.
Further comments from the, come forward and introduce yourself. That's okay, come to the microphone though, because nobody on the TV will hear you if you don't.
Hi, my name is Django Grace. I'm a student here in Brattleboro. First of all, Brandy, your hair is awesome.
Thank you.
Also, your statement was awesome.
Thank you.
I have a letter from.
In that order.
That's fine.
Yeah, no, your hair's like super cool. I have a letter from a youth who, Rio Dimes, who could not be here tonight because she's at Croca learning about cool stuff. This is a letter from her, and she was really pushing the climate declaration, so I'll read that now. I regret my inability to be here on this important night. Despite my efforts, I was unable to make it here. But I want to bring the focus to the most important aspect of tonight, which is our heating climate. We, as Brattleboro, make a contribution to the climate crisis. We use various types of energy. We drive cars, we heat our homes, and our own municipal buildings. We use our stoves to make food. The list goes on, and this list is not blaming us for following in the society's footsteps, but rather taking responsibility in the fact that as this moment, it is inevitable that we will have some effect. Declaring a climate emergency in Brattleboro is a step we can take to show that we are ready to make those necessary progressions toward a sustainable town and world. If we make those moves now, we are a leader, because others will follow. Brattleboro is a role model for making towns across this nation. For many towns across this nation, Instead of waiting for our final few years of draining hope to scramble and catch up, we need to be an example and this rise to the potential that we have. The climate is changing much faster at much faster rates than it has ever before. So we must change at an even faster one. We have to catch up while we still have time. While we still have these 11 years, which are decreasing as we speak. We have so much to do in these 11 years. We must start now. This declaration provides us with the chance to take these first few steps on this long journey. It opens up decision making to our residents and provides compassion to our youth and to the other people who are being affected the most by the climate crisis. I think she's referring to the frontline communities. The Declaration of Climate Emergency is so important, and I hope you understand this. It is an overarching statement of our town's commitment to do the right thing. Please support everyone. Support our youth, support everyone in the front line, support frontline communities, support our beautiful earth that we have the privilege to call home. Please declare a climate emergency.
Thank you, Janko. That's a great way to bring people's comments when they can't be here, by the way.
Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly how to do it. And you stayed within your 3 minutes, according to Daniel's phone. Further comments from the community who's here? Did you have another? I thought you said you had two.
I wanted to talk, but
Well,
I was just realizing.
no, I just realized you said two. Yeah.
Yeah. So I also I'm helping pushing the declaration, obviously. But I just wanted to speak from a youth's point of view and a student's point of view. So right now, as I'm kind of going into this crisis, I realize that it's going to be the rest of my life that I'm dealing with this thing, unless we stop it in the next 11 years. And probably after that, I'm going to keep having to deal with it. And going into it, I'm realizing that, like, as a youth, it is super hard for me to actually make any difference. The best thing I can do is tell adults to make a difference and trust that you guys are going to take responsibility for that. Of course, you guys don't have to. It's out of the goodness of your heart and for my future and your future, too. But when I read this declaration, first I didn't understand because there's a lot of words. But then, as I read through it again, I realized that this would be so awesome for our Brattleboro if we adopted this thing. I mean, it would make us super popular, first of all. I mean, how awesome does, like, on all our street signs, on our, like, coming into Brattleboro, the climate incubator or something, I don't know. So, and second, like, it gives me a voice. It gives a youth a voice. These meetings where people can come and give suggestions that you guys could then enact and put into effect, I think that would be awesome and great, and people like me could have a voice and I mean, going into this crisis, I want to have practice, I guess. Yeah. And please don't say that you guys are doing enough when you make your arguments, because you're not. Thank you.
Thanks, Janko. Further questions or comments from the community? Ricky?
Hi, I'm Ricky Rosati from District 2, and I would appreciate a moment of the prolonged silence heard by the invited senators who are absent from attending tonight, particularly for the declaration. Also, I heard reference tonight to people advising people to utilize Google, whereas Google is a very corrupt business and there are safer alternative search engines to use and services like DuckDuckGo for search engines and ProtonMail for email encryption. And my primary concern with the declaration is that the word in it of war, which we would be braver to use the word peace and make a peace treaty instead. Thank you.
I agree with you on that one.
All right.
Yeah, I felt that way too. But semantics for me. Further questions or comments from the community before I bring it back to this table? Yes, Michael?
Michael Bosworth from Brattleboro. Just a few comments. I think there's really a lot that's good about the declaration. I'm not comfortable with all parts of it. I have not been at all involved with it. I'm not also comfortable with the war wording. But paragraph 13 particularly, I like that a whole lot. But I actually just came up to ask a little bit more about the question about paragraph 12. How does that actually translate? Does that mean every month there'll be meetings and potential ordinances would come to the select board out of that for 30-day trials? Is that what we're talking about?
Is that how it's usually enacted? That's how I understand it. And what I don't know is it supposed to be quorums? Because that seems out of our jurisdiction
All
to
that has to
assume.
be explored.
Yeah.
Should I explain? May I explain?
You can briefly explain your idea, and then if it gets passed, we'll explore the actual details with Bob
Okay.
Fisher.
The charter has provisions for the select board to pass ordinances and for the representative town meeting to pass ordinances. There is an elaborate ratification process which involves a waiting period of, I think, 10 days and then a hearing and then another 20 days and another hearing and then so forth and then a final vote. For emergency ordinances, there is a much shorter procedure because it's an emergency and it involves just a short waiting period and one hearing. There is no quorum requirement at a hearing. It's just an officially sponsored meeting of any voter who wants to come and speak. And at the hearing, the ideas would be proposed and the minutes taken, presumably by a member of the select board. The select board is the default moderator, facilitator of all public hearings in the town. The select board can also assign the moderation to another person.
Thank you for your, does that answer your question?
I think so. And so if there's a declaration of emergency that gets approved, then it would mean these emergency ordinances would have be more obviously a tool to use.
Yeah, and not everything that comes out of these meetings might not be in ordinance form. It might be in a ballot measure form. You might make it into a ballot measure form. I mean, this is an incubator for the whole range of processes. The emergency ordinance one is the one listed.
Thank you. Okay, we've heard comment from this table. We've heard comment from the sitting community members, and I'm now going to bring it back to this table. Who would like to speak at this table?
I'm ready.
David?
First, I want to thank you for bringing this to us and participating in the process, which is frustrating, but you'll wind up with a better outcome than not taking time to think it through and talk it through, particularly when it's the public's business. We're elected leaders. Our job is to respond thoughtfully to members of the community, and sometimes that takes a while. The effort you're making here will make things better in this community, and I'm glad to support your activism and your citizenship. I think the only other thing I want to say is that it was actually, I won't use my words, but Jane Austen's words, and it's for my board members as well as you, that it's not what we feel or what we say, it's what we do that matters. That's it.
Tim?
Well, so I think this declaration is a mess. I have a lot of problems with many different parts of it. And I'd rather not even dive into all of the problems that I have with it, because I think it refuses to recognize that we sitting here have limited powers. I think it assumes a level of power and authority and actionable items that we do not possess. It's filled with vagueness and problems, one of which is declaring that whereas reliance on technology instead of our virtues has also caused the crisis and cannot alone save the world. I don't even know what that means. And I'm not sure you could define what I mean, you could go on with pages what that sentence means, and it's not something that a municipal body would be appropriately enacting. Oh, let me just say my piece.
It's going to stay at this table.
Mr. Dimes said that we were paralyzed, and sitting up here, honestly, am I optimistic or foolish? I don't feel paralyzed at all. I feel like this board has stated clearly that we see the climate crisis as a dangerous thing for our world, and that we have been taking meeting after meeting clear and very resolute steps to make a difference in our sphere of this world. In new business, item B, if you've read ahead that far, is a very important discussion about local investment in renewable energy projects. And that comes out of the last bit of what we want to do, which is make Brattleboro 100% renewable when it comes to the electricity that we use as a municipality in our buildings. So we're already at 90% or thereabouts, which is way ahead of the state, and it's ahead of Paris Accords as far as I'm understanding that aspect of those accords. So we're going to get there possibly tonight with a vote. We're going to get way ahead of a lot of areas to 100% renewable power. Again, that's a small step, but it's a step that actually we have control over as a community and as a board, okay? And I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between this document wanting to save the world and coming to the select board with an actual thing that we could support because it's within our powers to do so. We're here to do the business of the town, and that includes only those things that with the power that the town has the power to do business with. So I can't support this document. I do have a tidy little statement that I'd like to read to you, and I want to see what people think of this. Brattleboro should do its part to achieve or exceed the goals of the Paris Climate Accord and the Vermont Comprehensive Energy Plan. The Brattleboro Selectboard commits the municipality to meeting these goals for greenhouse gas reduction and renewable energy adoption, and asks every household, organization, and business in town to do the same. We commit to joining those state, national, and international initiatives that best represent the intent of the Paris Climate Accord, and request that the Energy Committee track and inform us concerning appropriate options for us to sign on to. That was passed by the Brattleboro Select Board, not this board, not the previous board, but the board before that, exactly 2 years ago tonight. So that is the type of statement that I think is appropriate. It was passed unanimously with a very different board.
I was like, wait a minute, the three of us were there.
Okay. But sort of politically different, let's say.
True.
Okay, sort of balanced, different balance. So that's, for me, that's good because it's a clear statement, it's a clear commitment, and now that we think about it, we now have this coordinator, which was a huge fight up here and within our community, and that fight was amazing and very healthy, I want to say, because I was on the losing end, but hopefully our whole community is going to be on the winning end of that decision. So why we would adopt something like this, which is, to be kind, a mess, I think, and not have our new person, which we hope is amazing for our community, this sustainability coordinator, be folded into decisions like this and recommend, along with the Energy Committee, things that we can get behind and things that we can get our whole community behind. And I'm going to be up here for the next 2 years or 2.5 years, you're stuck with me, constantly reminding people that for a lot of people using catastrophism and the word emergency is very polarizing. And I think it's inappropriate because people don't know what you mean by emergency. It's a very difficult term. I mean, when I hear emergency, I think this town has a public health emergency. And if I'm going to sign on to an emergency declaration calling for emergency meetings, I want those meetings to be about the opioid epidemic in our town, because people are dying every day in front of us. What's going on with the climate crisis in our world is very difficult for people to wrap their heads around, and they need to have hope, because there is hope in this situation. It really is not. There's no consensus that the world is, it's ridiculous to tell young people that the world's going to end in 12 years or 20 years or 30 years. The consensus is that there's going to be a lot of changes in our world. And what we need to act upon the things we can do to reel that back and slow that or bring them to a halt. But there's no consensus that there's some sort of doomsday scenario happening. And when you fall into that trap of doomsday saying, that's been happening through the millennia, and you are looking not like a legitimate someone speaking from science. So anyway, I've gone on long enough.
Thank you, Tim. This side of the table, who wants to go first, Liz?
I'll go.
Sure,
We'll leave the
it's in order.
suspense to Daniel at the end.
Oh, thanks.
We can't let him do
Wait,
that
didn't we
each
do
time.
that recently?
Yeah, this feels like
Deja vu all over
We're
again.
setting you up.
Oh, he loves it. What, are you kidding me? So here we are again, and I think the board affirmed in several meetings that we all agree that climate change is real. And the reason why we have this matter before us again is because, not because of time constraints or scheduling per se, but because there were 3 no votes pending the last time it was heard. So Brandy's courtesy to all of us in revisiting this issue should be well taken. My vote has not changed. I do not think it's responsible for the select board to sign on behalf of the town of Brattleboro to this statement. I think there's so much wrong with this statement. We've already discussed the fact that there's kind of a warmongering attitude in this statement. It also is a vague anti-government screed, which if it had specifics, for example, if it said that the Trump administration has rolled back the methane gas standards, and that has the effect of the pollution from 64 million motor vehicles, that would be a fact. But this is much too vague for anyone to wrap their heads around, and similarly, the discussion about the environment, I felt the same way about that particular point that Tim raised. It was very vague and difficult to ascertain. And I think we're doing the youth of Brattleboro a disservice if we think that some national statement written by committee would be appropriate for the town of Brattleboro to sign on to. I don't think it is. I don't think it's well written. I think it's vague. And I don't think it's appropriate for Brattleboro. I don't think that there's, if we want collectively to affect climate change, the best thing that we could do is get the voters of New Hampshire to vote out the president. And that's, we can all march and we can cheer and we can do whatever we want, but when it comes down to brass tacks, we all have to vote. So no, there'd be no way that I would sign on to this, but I do think that it would be appropriate for us now to reaffirm the statement that we made 2 years ago, to say that climate change is real, and what Tim read, that we can reaffirm that statement about the Paris Accords and the state energy plan, which is quite a vigorous plan. And then we can use what we decided on just at the last meeting of a sustainability coordinator. Let's let that person do their work. Be hired, evaluate what's appropriate for Brattleboro to do, and that person and the Energy Committee can come to the Select Board and we can find what's best for us to do. But this declaration of emergency is not at all appropriate for Brattleboro to sign on to.
Thank you, Liz. Daniel?
Where do you stand? I have really mixed feelings about it. I've actually worked with the climate emergency organization in my previous job in passing something kind of like this in Berkeley, California. It was like 8 pages long. I'm glad this is only 2. So the way I feel about this is, I think there are 4 things happening here. Like, number 1 is like a statement, right? A declaration that we have a crisis on our planet that is, humankind has not faced its like before. And maybe that's where we get to this kind of war language, right? It feels like we need to have a mobilization that's like the mobilizations we had during our world wars. I don't necessarily, I wouldn't want to wordsmith this within an inch of its life to be able to say, yes, we need to declare a climate emergency. I think that we could declare that we are in a climate crisis. I don't really know how to define emergency within this context, but yeah, we're absolutely in a crisis. And I think that part of the power of doing that is, Extinction Rebellion talk about telling the truth, right? Tell the truth about our current state. And so I think I could get behind telling the truth. I don't necessarily want to use these words, right? And then, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, for me, the thing that I get most excited about. I actually tried to get the town of Brattleboro to commit to ending its use of heating oil a few years back.
Yes, you
Came
did.
here with a tape measure one time.
Was that the tape measure night?
Yeah. I missed the fuel oil purchase last meeting. I was pretty glad to miss it. Because I would have felt bad.
It doesn't
voting
mean
for
it didn't happen.
It was really
I know,
awkward.
we don't need it. It's going to get cold this winter. So I would be supportive of a binding commitment from the town of Brattleboro to commit to ending its use of fossil fuels by 2030. I'm not interested in signing on for something where we strive or try. I've worked on those kinds of resolutions myself. We are striving and trying, right? Some of the actions we're going to take tonight are striving and trying. I would be very supportive of a firm commitment and fossil fuel use by 2030. So that's the second thing. And, I want to make sure that I'm clear about whose emissions we're talking about there. We're talking about the municipalities, right? I don't have control over what you do in your homes,
Nor should you.
No, I guess not. That would be bad. And then the third thing is that this declaration proposes public forums. Monthly hearings, right? A hearing is a legal term. I don't know whether this select board would like to be in charge of monthly hearings on top of our other business. I have my doubts about whether or not that kind of I don't want to call it a run around our town government, but I think that we have a very functional town government, and we have ways in which to bring forward ideas and make decisions about them and look at our budget, and we have a lot of professional people working within this government, most of whom have spent all day working today and are at home watching this and thinking whatever they're thinking. So I think that we don't need to go around the town government and have these monthly hearings in order to propose remedies. And I certainly the thing that I feel most strongly about is that I do not feel that we need to then enact emergency ordinances based on what happens in those hearings. I think that we have ways of vetting ideas that are solid, and I think that with the sustainability coordinator coming on board, and with a more functional energy committee, we have 2 people that are volunteering for it this evening, later on if we approve it. I think that we have the mechanisms in place to propose remedies. The public is entirely welcome to engage in that work. So I don't feel this need to have emergency ordinances coming from these public forums. I think we, as a community, we're pretty good at putting on public forums. I've been to a few of them, and as part of the activist community, I know that we're capable of mobilizing people to come out and say what needs to be said, right? And that's why you're here, and I commend you for that. So I would support a binding commitment from this board for the town of Brattleboro to end its fossil fuel use by 2030. I would support a broad statement that, yes, the town of Brattleboro acknowledges we are in a climate crisis, but I don't support the emergency ordinances, and I don't support the select board being in charge of monthly hearings.
Thank you, Daniel.
Let me try and change your mind at least on one of those, because the monthly hearings, to me, is probably the most important. Well, no, I don't want to go that far. It's very important in terms of Brattleboro, because it's an opportunity for us to engage the public in conversations, except for when we have a topical agenda. Nobody's here. Nobody comes to these meetings. And we've had forums on unexciting things, and people don't come to those either. But this would be exciting, and this would attract people. And if ideas came through those meetings that called for for us to do something quickly, if some really good ideas came out of that and called for us to do something quickly, we have the means of doing it. It doesn't mean that we'll have to pass emergency ordinance for every idea that comes from that. It doesn't mean that we have to be at all those meetings.
Right.
What it means is that we'll have an opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
All set?
Yes.
Go ahead.
What it means is that we'll have the opportunity to hear get ideas from the public, which is generally a good thing for a public board like us. I think we're not as smart as we think we are, and that we can't know what the effect of this is going to be. And it's entirely possible, it's likely that these kids will be right, and this will make a difference, and it might just energize them to do what you suggested, or what you encouraged, Liz, which is to go to New Hampshire and talk to their peers over there and get them to talk to their parents in their communities about getting somebody nominated for president. What happens in New Hampshire in 5 months is going to be huge for the future of all the things that you're concerned about. And if this adds 1 calorie of energy to your efforts to engage people in New Hampshire, it's absolutely worth doing. There are a dozen things in here that I could go through and say, well, I don't like the way that's worded. This isn't really a good one. I think, not pointing out the racist nature of the racist policies that created how do you describe them here? The frontline communities. All these things that aren't perfect. And there are lots of things that always aren't perfect. I think people probably spent weeks, if not months, talking about some of the things that we raised tonight. I don't think that really matters. I think there's, as I said the first time this came up, this is an aspirational document. There are a lot of statements in here that people will take issue with. That's always the case. But the point is that we don't know what the impact is going to be. We don't know if it's going to make a difference. And I think we need to give the kids a chance.
I think what we established at our last meeting, and we spent $100,000, or committed at least $100,000 to, is a process by which we hire a sustainability coordinator, and that sustainability coordinator not only researches sustainable energy actions for the town, but also engages the public. And lastly, is support to the Energy Committee. And a revised Energy Committee would be the perfect venue for these discussions that we all want to have regarding what's best for the town, what measures can we take, and that combination of a sustainability coordinator and a revised energy committee seems like a home run in terms of what the aspirational goal before us here tonight is.
I was going to say something about that. From the job description for the
We're not gonna read
sustainability
this.
coordinator, this went out to the world on Friday. We haven't hired somebody yet, but it's in the works. And the third thing that this person is responsible for is building capacity and relationships with a variety of entities, including other public agencies, civic organizations, community and faith-based organizations, businesses, philanthropic organizations, and community residents, and then to organize and execute internal and external stakeholder engagement. I feel like we don't need to rush today into, saying we're going to have a, monthly hearing on the climate crisis. I think that we'll hire a great person, and we'll bring this proposal to them. I mean, I don't mean like bring the whole declaration, but like that idea of like, how are we going to do stakeholder engagement? How are we going to do community engagement?
Any further comments from this board?
No, not for me.
Does this board feel like they're ready for a vote, or does this board feel like they need further comment from other people who are not on this board?
I'm ready to vote.
I'm ready to vote.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. Please.
Okay.
We need a motion.
We're not going out anymore. I think we've all heard enough at this third meeting.
So we need a motion, which I will be happy to make.
Okay.
I move that we support the declaration of climate emergency as presented.
David has made the motion that we approve the declaration of climate emergency as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Or no. I don't know why I went with nay. Motion has been defeated. Is there a further motion? If somebody else wanted to make a motion, could they make a separate motion on this board?
They could, but they don't need to. In the absence of approval of the document, you don't need to take any other particular action
But
unless
there
you
was some
choose to.
conversation about reaffirming of the Paris Accord and some conversation from Daniel about a specific, and I didn't know if it
Yeah,
could be
I mean-
smushed together and then voted.
Or we could just let the sustainability coordinator be
Whatever
hired
The board's pleasure is not counting me.
and let that person's work come back to us in a form that we'd be more universally agreeable about.
Yeah, I don't see a need to reaffirm something that was a unanimous vote just 2 years ago.
The other thing I would like to mention is this is not the final option. This can also be put forth to petition to get, I don't know how many signatures are needed to get something in front of town meeting. Is it
5%.
5% of the voters can get it, so that instead of it coming to a 5-person board, it goes to the full representative town meeting body and is discussed on the floor at that time, which is an option I've always liked and is an option I'd like you to keep in mind. In that, I would recommend highly not taking a national document and bringing it to that body, really trying to keep it Brattleboro and Vermont specific as much as you can, because that's kind of the Vermont way. Vermont likes to have its own flavor, its own grassroots twist, and that's going to appeal to people. Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, are you allowing a final comment by the panel?
No, we have a lot
Thank you
of
and good night.
Thank you and good night.
Thanks.
At this time,
No.
okay, we are going to move into new business. And our first item of new business is, this is actually really important as we talk about being a Dillon's Rule state versus a home rule state. This is strategy to support municipal self-governance in the 2020 legislative session. This includes a discussion with Vermont League of Cities and Towns Legislative Advocacy Team. Peter?
Yes, so I think it's actually a great segue, your final comment from the last item about the Vermont way and looking for local Vermont solutions to what we face here in our community is exactly what the self-governance movement among municipalities in Vermont is all about. We do have Gwen Zakoff with us this evening from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. She's a municipal policy advocate there, one of two people who works every day throughout the legislative session with the legislators, and then in the off-season, so to speak, does a lot of legwork with municipalities and municipal officials to make sure that we're well informed about what's been passed as we come out of a legislative session, and the well coordinated in the preparations we make for the next round. We also have with us tonight Representative Molly Burke. Thanks for joining us, Molly, to be part of the discussion. Molly is one of the sponsors, along with the other two representatives from Brattleboro, of legislation in the House that is proposing a self-governance, limited self-governance pilot project for municipalities in Vermont that we've had quite a bit of discussion about here before. I won't go all back into the details of where that came from, what it's about. I think you'll want to hear from Gwen about the broader statewide perspective of the municipalities, and perhaps from Molly about what's happening in the legislature around this. The one thing I would say is we had good, strong support out of Brattleboro for this, both from the select board level and from representative town meeting last spring, as part of the push when this was being considered in the Senate. And it was adopted in a modified form, not exactly as it had been presented, but with some restrictions attached to it. It was adopted as S-106 by a 21-8 vote in the Senate last year. And Senator Jeanette White was the sponsor from Putney, from Windham County, on our behalf. And she's also the chair of the Government Operations Committee, so she really was an important leader in this effort. Wasn't able to be with us tonight, but really carried the ball in the Senate. And so now what's ahead of us and what we'll be speaking about here this evening is looking ahead to when S-106 gets taken up by the House Government Operations Committee, and we hope ultimately by the full House in the coming legislative session to see if we can get a pilot project moving, and some other consideration that is going on among municipalities, together with guidance from league staff around how we might achieve a greater degree of self-governance in Vermont. If it's okay with the board, I think the best thing to do would be to invite Gwen to come, perhaps Molly with her, and hear from them about the look ahead to the House.
That was going to be my next thing to say, absolutely.
Join us in our comfy chairs.
You're going to make people feel bad about the other chairs.
Well,
It's the second.
honestly, these are nicer.
Yeah, they are.
And I think they're donated. We got them from the police
yeah.
station. So, not like we paid a lot for them.
Sounds sustainable to me.
Oh, my God. Okay, so Peter has given a pretty nice kickoff introduction, and I'd like to see where you take it from there.
Great. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
So exciting to be here. I don't make it down to Brattleboro all that often, but it's really awesome to drive through your downtown and it being so vibrant and local.
Get that, Chris?
Maybe you can write a letter to the
Get that
paper
for the
to that
paper?
effect.
Vibrant and local.
I mean, it truly is, actually. A lot of communities around the state are really struggling to have downtowns that look like yours, and so you should be really proud of what you've done. So,
thank you.
You're welcome. So thanks for inviting VLCT here to have this discussion. It's really more of a sort of a check-in, and here to answer any questions you might have about this self-governance initiative. It was, this is not a new idea, this whole idea of, getting more local control and more, municipal authority over municipal issues. I think it's sort of hit a real leap of sort of momentum forward from communities because of this real frustration. I think the last discussion you guys were having about the climate initiative and whatnot really speaks to it, is the frustration with not having the powers at the local level to really help your communities solve local problems locally. And you have two real extreme options right now, which is either to change general law, and you're changing general law that would impact, a Burlington or a Brattleboro or a Brookfield or a Victory or a, Cambridge. I mean, it's sort of a one-size-fits-all model, which doesn't really make sense. The other option is to have your charters. I know Brattleboro has a really robust charter, but those tend to also go through a vetting process through the legislature that can be highly restrictive, and it's also something that it's not very malleable. It doesn't really bend and break with sort of the issues that are here and now. So this proposal that we put forward this year was modeled off of a West Virginia model that started off really small. It was a pilot program to sort of go from a Dillon's rule to a home rule for their communities. And long story short, over a 10-year period, it went from just a handful of communities to basically this year, the state legislature essentially granting broad home rule authority in the state of West Virginia, because the sort of doom and gloom scenarios just didn't manifest themselves when they let go of the reins and let municipalities sort of take care of themselves. So S-106, which is the bill that sort of got momentum, was voted out of the Senate very favorably. We have Molly did a fabulous job introducing it in the House. She's not on the Government Operations Committee, so she doesn't really have the sort of sway that Senator White has. And Senator White, because she is the chair of that committee, was a total warrior for that bill and really pushed it out of committee, and we're really thankful for that. And the only problem with sort of how it looks now is that it is highly restrictive, and it looks very different from what we had initially wanted. And that's sort of the legislative, sausage making process, is you come up with a proposal and at the end it looks really different from what you wanted. The proposal we had, which the crux of it sort of falls on the idea that instead of the legislature having final say, that there would be some sort of commission with broad minds and broad powers to sort of grant in a pilot way certain levels of authority for communities in an application sort of process. We were told from the legislative legal counsel that was impossible under the state constitution. There was no way of challenging that from our perspective. Legally, it was very unfortunate. We see it as highly questionable, considering what happened with Act 46 and the legislature granting authority over to the State Board of Education to make really, basically determine the municipal path forward for school districts. They weren't looking at it in the same way for other municipalities being cities, towns, and villages. So I still sort of question that whole thing, but unfortunately there's really not any other way than to just speak your piece and then let the chips fall where they may. So now the bill is in the House. We have 1 year left in the biennium. There's a lot going on in the legislature. We've been promised to a period of time where we can present the bill to the committee, talk about it, then take testimony. I will say that it's going to be a really heavy lift in the House, more so than the Senate. The House Government Operations Committee tends to start with the charters, for example. Generally, they start in the House and move their way to the Senate. They tend to go through things with a really fine-tooth comb, and they often deviate from sort of the proposals that municipalities put before them. So we're going to try our best to keep 106 alive, to massage it and make it a better bill, because right now we're not really happy with what it is. And we really are only hoping that if it moves forward that it's going to be better and an improved bill. And the reality is if that does not happen, or if it becomes politically clear that the House of Representatives, or at least the Committee of Jurisdiction, doesn't support it in sort of the way that our municipalities would like, and it doesn't give us what we need, we have other options out there. We are looking towards, this is really coming from the and your fabulous town manager spoke to it earlier, is that we're hearing from so many communities of different sizes that they need more tools in their toolbox to solve these problems. They're spending so much time trying to fit within, the confines of general law and charters they may have or may not have. And so using the tools that we do have, specifically our charters, looking at those as a possible vehicle for really pushing this issue of self-governance forward. And asking our communities, and communities have already stepped forward with ideas and proposals to put this on their town meeting ballot and to start holding public hearings about changing their charter or even adopting a charter that would increase the opportunity for voters to have some say in sort of some intentional self-governance initiatives. And ones that might be, that actually should be right-sized for their communities. And additionally, communities have stepped forward to include things on their in their charters potentially that would essentially grant them broad authority over other powers that have already been granted to other communities. So essentially saying, like, if Brattleboro has it in their charter, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and sort of being able to borrow from everybody else instead of each individually having to go before the legislature and go through this process of approval. We're obviously going to continue forcefully to lobby and to advocate against the any legislative efforts to preempt local initiatives that really respond to local issues. And looking towards 2020, again, it being the second year of the biennium, really make sure that self-governance becomes a real central issue in the 2020 election cycle. Like I said earlier, I feel like it's really come to a peak and it's really come to a head that, everyone's sort of singing the same tune of really like, we need to find local solutions to these problems because it's not really happening at the larger level. And it's really encouraging to hear the discussions that are happening. I mean, I go to these select board meetings all over the state and you are all doing like phenomenal work with very few tools in front of you. And you're the closest to the ground and you hear, all of your communities from all of your community members directly. And I think the time is right for this. And we're hopeful that with the support of communities like yours, and I will say, like, hats off to Brattleboro for showing up to Local Government Day and for having a fabulous town manager who's a great advocate for your community, really, really fabulous advocate. And your representatives and your senators, they're a force to be reckoned with in all the best ways. So that's sort of the update of where we are. It's, again, sausage is being made, so it's hard to say what's going to happen, but we're not taking the foot off the acceleration pedal. We're trying to find a way forward and find that balance between getting the powers that are and the tools that our communities need, while also appeasing sort of the powers that be at the legislative level, who for over 150 years have sort of controlled everything. And the way I see it is that the state has a lot already on their plate. And the issues have gotten so big at the state level that it's really hard to also focus at the small details that fall down to the local government level. And this is a great opportunity for them to say, you know what, for these particular issues that are really municipal in nature, have at it. Solve those problems. We'll give you the tools you need. And so we're working towards that and remaining open to options on the table to get us to where we need to go and be creative with it. So.
Wow. Well, that's.
I agree with Ricky.
And thank you. Do you mind if I jump in?
No, I don't mind. Molly, do you want to add anything before Tim
Just a
jumps
couple
in?
things I want to say. It's just a real pleasure to work with Gwen and Karen of the VLCT. And, we've encountered these situations, say, in the Transportation Committee, trying to get more money for town highway aid.
She's amazing.
And we've managed, but you're coming up against, very challenging state, municipality tugs, and naturally, that's naturally there. I think, I think all of our delegation will sort of use our own relationships among members of the committee that none of us are on, the Government Operations Committee in the House, to try to, make people understand that this can be good for their community too. I think that's the thing. I think it's just sort of been an issue that's off a lot of legislators' radar, maybe not select boards. But I think we need to, get that moving a little bit, and Gwen is a great person to do that. So we'll just do what we can and do our best and hope that, and also I think really get leadership on board and make it a really priority for the majority caucus. So.
Well, first of all, thanks for coming on down, and I'm really impressed with VLCT. I'm one of those nerds that gets the actual printed document because I really like what you put together and all of the ways you support municipalities. And I really liked what you said about, I'll put words into your mouth, but maybe using a carrot versus the stick, with the idea that maybe we could take some of the work off of Montpelier, right? With actions that are not controversial for the most part. And my question might be, is I see sort of a difference between support. I'm really happy to hear that some small communities are throwing their voice in too. But my main concern, and I sort of picked this up when I was up there on the town government day, is that there might be a perception that we refer to the hub community, and we have very unique pressures on our taxpayers here that non-hub communities don't have. So do you think one of the keys in success going forward in the next session is to bring in those smaller communities that might not be as aware of advantages to them? Because that's this sort of like idea that Brattleboro is and other larger towns are trying for some sort of power grab versus.
Yeah, it's a really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate to see that, but I think that I see that every day. There's sort of the haves and the have-nots of the world, and the divide between more populated or more affluent communities versus those that have a larger grand list or have more resources or amenities or whatnot. It's the divide is getting larger and larger. And so the smaller communities are really just trying to solve really small, really tiny problems, and are having the same frustrations, just in a different sort of dialogue. And so it's about
scale.
It's about scale, right? And it's about educating the Brattleboros that, these smaller towns are really, they're saying the same things, they're just dealing with different problems, and vice versa. And I think communities are really receptive to that, and they just need to be sort of nudged forward and sort of explained to that it's not a have or have-nots discussion. Like, it should be a global discussion about how we move forward, and how you can still think regionally, you can still work with each other, but you sort of kind of need to support your neighbors and trust that the processes, the people in charge at all levels are going to be taking care of those folks that they're, the voters have put them in charge to take care of, whether it be a select board or a representative or a senator. So yeah, I agree with you. There is that divide, but I will say that I'm actually hearing more from the smaller and the middle-sized communities that are interested in this, because I feel like there's a lot of communities, like, I'm not picking on any in particular, but you can have a Rutland City or a Burlington or any bigger community that already has a really robust charter. They might have a mayoral system, and they are okay with that. They don't necessarily feel like they need to find another way of going about things. But it's those sort of middle-sized and smaller communities that are actually saying, like a charter, it's like, God, I don't know, a charter just seems like so, rigid, and we don't have the administrative capacity to sort of keep up with this. And so having a more flexible application process for like sort of self-governance over X, Y, and Z makes a lot more sense to them. So it's such a new idea, and it's not even crafted in a very black and white manner yet. that you're always going to have that sort of, knee-jerk reaction of being, skepticism.
And I can see the town's not really also not being used to having
Sure.
that, the idea
Sure.
of something being within their domain. They're so used to following the procedure as it has always been.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll shut up.
Just a quick clarification or amplification of one of the things that Gwen was speaking to. So the league staff has actually convened a task force of municipal officials this summer to work around these issues. And one of the things that has come forward from that is there is a really good broad cross-section of bigger towns and middle towns and smaller towns that are represented within that work. And at the same time, we have acknowledged that the hub town work needs to go forward, right?
Sure.
So that it's both and, as opposed to last session, it kind of felt like we were morphing a bit from a more narrow definition of it that was more about hub towns into the broader self-governance for all municipalities. Now that effort is getting some momentum and is getting actually really sort of more complicated in exciting ways because of the input that's coming in from smaller communities and from a broader cross-section around the state, we're realizing that's going to have life. That's being better defined, both for the coming session and then the 2020 election. And at the same time, we need to get back to doing some of the work that's specific to hub towns about what we together as similar communities facing similar challenges can do to learn from each other. And so, for instance, at the upcoming annual conference at Town Fair, there'll be some of both things going on. There'll be some very heavy emphasis on self-governance because of the fact that affects everybody, and then also a program that is specific to hub towns, the work we can do together.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. There's the Cambridges of the world, there's the Facetons. I mean, there's all sorts of communities that have signed on. Their select boards have made statements specifically signing on to the sort of self-governance initiative. So it's a broad swath
Thank
support.
you. Liz and then David.
I'm puzzled that this is not a partisan issue. This is legislature versus town, which is interesting. And it seems to me that it's a modernization effort, and that people should realize that we need every tool in our toolbox to run a modern town and city.
100% concur.
Kind of following up on that, the information about the small and medium towns, do you have a strategy for how to get those towns and those select boards to contact their legislators and get this bill through? I mean, there are obviously problems, there are big issues in Montpelier, but I'm not a patient person, and frankly, I don't feel like we've got a lot of time to do a charter change, to try and do it that way, and then wait until the legislature gets to that. So is there, I mean, you talked about charters and town meetings having it on their ballots. Are you looking, do you have a strategy basically to coordinate that effort and get select boards pushing their legislators, so you're not having to do it all on the floor of the State House?
Sure. So there's 246 towns and villages and cities. This is to find a coordinated effort for anything. When you have not everyone thinks like everybody else, not everyone has the same priorities as other people. It's impossible. So all we can do is provide the education and the tools and the knowledge to support those communities to move forward. We can certainly circle back when requested to senators and representatives to support their communities, but it would be a full-time job for 20 people to do that. So our strategy is really just to make the issue, the larger issue, the center issue, and basically direct it towards every other issue we're dealing with in the state, whether it's transportation funding, climate change initiatives, economic development, anything, and really drive that home. And that be the messaging. And the way the legislative process works, and I think that you can speak better to that, is it's really, really hard to get, every single representative on board. It's pretty much impossible. And it's there's a reason we're here right now having this conversation. We've tried this. My boss has been working for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns since 1987. This has been an initiative that we've had since 1987, probably even before she was on board. It's really difficult, again, for those in power to let go of the control, and that's essentially what we're dealing with right now. So,
And fear of the unknown too.
Of course.
Some people just don't want to change.
I'm wondering if I don't understand, how you work or how the league works, but it seems like the effort should be to get and it sounds like the committee's already going to take testimony on it.
Sure.
So if identifying those legislators and getting their constituents.
Oh, sure, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I must have.
Yeah, when you went to the
question.
246 towns, it's only.
Yeah, no,
12
we've
people.
already circled back with those representatives in those committees. That's part of what we do every day for every bill that we're following. It's another thing to see things toward the finish line and to make it a priority for the entire body, and to get a bill that looks like it's going to work and gives the actual tools we need instead of just appeasing us or throwing us a bone here or there where
Barely.
We might as well just use a charter, so it's we can have those conversations, but really making everyone happy with it is really really difficult, if not impossible. So you try to get what you can, and we always have those conversations, and we're always trying to educate, and we're gradually moving. And the fact that we got a bill out of the Senate with a 21-8 vote is unheard of. So that was a huge victory for us, and it doesn't seem like a victory because it might not amount to anything if they don't follow suit in the House. But I think that there's momentum, and we're just trying to tend to that garden and help it grow a little bit more.
I'm not sure, I don't know if I'm really happy that the Senate passed the bill, but I think the way the way I understand the legislature works, the chairs have a lot of influence, and Jeanette was the chair, and she pushed it. So it's not all that miraculous in my thinking. But that's the other part of the legislatures. Is leadership, and what's your what's your plan to get the leadership to
So we've already had support from the speaker. We've had lukewarm support from the chair of the House Government Operations Committee, but they are unwilling to commit to make this a priority. So that's where we stand.
So I would definitely recommend to our community members that you can go online and you can look up the S-106 yourself, and particularly look at pages 8, 9, and half of 10, and see the restrictions that even with a bill that has come out that are being laid down on municipalities. And start being vocal with your legislators, because all of these things that you want to come and sit in your town and fight for, right now we have to pull that power away. And even in this bill that passed, which I'm glad something came out, it's 2.5 pages of things that they still don't want us to be able to do. Okay, and they're important things, they're money-making things, they're municipality shaping items. So the first thing that we can do is advocate as loudly as you can to your state legislators. Read this bill, read about Dillon's rule, read about how old Dillon's rule is and why that's even effective anymore, and start fighting so that you can start to have the control in your communities that you deserve to have.
1870 something.
Yeah.
Tell me that wasn't used to
64.
Hold power in a certain place.
And what's interesting is that where the state that came from is now a home rule state, so.
Hi, Franz Reichman. Hi, Molly. I've got a few questions. Who is the chair of government operations in the House?
In the House?
Yeah.
Sarah Copeland-Hansis from Brandon?
From Brandon.
Bradford, sorry.
From Bradford. Oh,
Yep.
It's a nice town. And you said Sarah?
Sarah Copeland.
Sarah Copeland.
Hansis.
Okay. And is presumably she particularly opposed to this? You said her support was lukewarm. Is that?
It's not a priority in the committee,
Yeah.
although we were told that they would take it up this year. There was no promises about supports
Okay.
necessarily.
And with regard to David's question about leadership, I mean, we do have a member of our delegation who's part of the leadership. Has Tristan taken a particularly strong position on this?
I think all the Whitman County delegation, we had a meeting with Peter last fall, at the end of the fall, I think, and I think everybody, all of us are on board, I believe. I can't say specifically, but it seemed like everybody was at the meeting. And yes, so I think it's going to be a matter of trying to, get some pressure at the leadership level, get some pressure on the committee chair, maybe from leadership, get some, as I said, working our personal relationships with people on the committee, et cetera.
And in terms of community members contacting legislators, I mean, for me to contact you on this is probably not going to pay a big dividend at this point, but not that you wouldn't be glad of some support, but I'm just wondering who in particular should we be contacting?
I mean, I think that when you contact, like, I'm your representative. When you contact me, even though I know you know that I support it, it means something.
Yeah.
When somebody gets an email from a constituent, not somebody from another district or whatever. So I think that when people contact their own representatives, it makes people pay attention that even, I support it, but, oh, well, maybe I need to go a little bit further and do a little bit more work in terms of
But how about the speaker, the majority leader,
Sure. So
people like that?
If I can help maybe with that question. So the Committee of Jurisdiction is the Government Operations Committee. So if you look on the legislative website, they have all the members listed in there. It wouldn't hurt to send a letter of support or an email to the chair, vice chair, potentially all members of the committee. I can't speak to those representatives in those committees, so how much weight they're going to give any single correspondence, but that's definitely the most direct route. So when you're talking about any sort of advocacy group, whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit or anything in between, whatever legislative bill is moving forward, you have access to all representatives and all senators.
So there's this other guy up there. I think they call him the governor. Is he taking a position on this?
The governor has said that he supports the idea, but he would like to see more details about the actual, structure of what it would look like. And again, the way legislature, the way bills work and how they form into law, it's hard to put a black and white document in front of an individual and say this is what we're going to be able to get at the end of the day.
So you're not looking for a lot of support from the governor's office?
We need to get through the legislature first before.
Well, but I mean, the governor presumably could exert some influence in the legislature as well. Is that?
I don't believe. I can't speak for
You don't think so?
governor. I just think that it's not perhaps not a priority for
Yeah.
the governor right now.
Okay.
But doesn't mean he won't support it.
Exactly.
Yeah, in the end, but I'm just thinking along the way.
He's not going to do that.
Okay, thank you.
I would say too, if you do write your letters, publish them in the local papers and share them on social media so you can raise awareness, pique people's interest to also do the same thing. I'm going to take it like this. David, you, Liz.
Franz, Mike Ramuki is on that committee, and so talking to friends in Dummerston or Putney or Westminster to encourage him to promote it and move it would be sort of, immediately effective. But this is really disappointing to me when you start to talk about charter and town meeting ballots and the the next election and stuff like that. And you mentioned Act 46, and one of the effects of Act 46 is that it added 6 cents. The merger meant a 6 cent increase in our school budget from last year, and we're already 30 to 80% or 80 cents higher in our total tax, property tax in all the surrounding towns. And with the healthcare cost, it's 12.9% increase that we're going to be looking at in the school district. That's going to make even more. And so being at that, if we don't have an alternative to the property tax, some other ways to raise revenue. And we just went to 7 cents on the rooms and on the, whichever one it was, the
Local options.
the local option sales tax. And if we don't get some other ways to remedy this, the town that you find so appealing is not going to look like this. We got less than half of the residences are owned by the people living in them. Vermont Yankee closed a few years ago, and we've had some pretty good investment and some industry that's moved in, but not nearly replacing that big a loss. We are next to New Hampshire. We're losing retailers. That's likely to continue. The social, I don't know how to describe it. Brandy did a really nice job. If you were here, you were at the beginning of the meeting. Is putting a lot of stress on our police and the entire town staff, the fire department and the public works and the town management staff as well. 60% of our kids aren't free reduced to lunch, and we've had to add a human resources and a sustainability coordinator to manage this town that's 6 times bigger than the surrounding towns that come here to make their living. So, I mean, I was hoping that you would have an idea or some thoughts about how you were going to get the towns where these other legislators on that committee lived to get those select boards to push those legislators to do it. And if they weren't that town, then find some other towns or somebody that knew them. And I mean, I know you have 246 towns and you have to negotiate for all, but I'm wondering if we might want to consider at some point hiring additional lobbyists in Montpelier to work on this for us, if that might be helpful to have Leonine or somebody working in the legislature with you. Because, I mean, maybe it's just impossible and it's not going to happen this year, or we'll get the hearings, but the minimum wage and the family leave and those things are just going to take it, and then never mind the cost of the retirement promises that are in amazing deficit. It's just really discouraging to think that this is, we got this far last year, and it sounds to me like you're lowering our expectations. This is not personal. I am disappointed. I'm practically depressed with this point.
I'm tremendously disappointed.
Yeah, but you carry it well. I'm not doing so well with it. And
I see your glasses half empty.
And make it half full. No, thanks. Okay. And so I don't know what to say except redouble your efforts, and if you need help, let us talk to us, because we can do we have resources, and we might be able to get some additional. Maybe you can't do that because you're this private group and they're that private group, but the way it works up there is that if you have people in there talking, things get done. And often the grassroots part of it, the contacting towns and getting them to contact their legislatures, gets overlooked. And that's, we can't overlook any of it. Well, that's enough.
Thank you, David.
Hi.
Don't forget to introduce yourself.
Mark Still, and I just want to be clear on the references of what we're supporting and what we're fighting here. I'm not asking you to repeat the content, but to demonstrate my current confusion, I have support S106 but object to pages 8, 9, and 10. Like, that's where I'm at right now. So
all right.
What is it?
That sounds pretty good.
What
It might have been my fault.
What is it that we're supporting? S106 but fighting some of the changes to it. Just
Sure.
what goes on the note I tell the Sergeant of Arms to send to.
I think support of S106 would probably suffice.
Okay.
It would be my job to sort of point out the pages that you referenced. I don't have the bill in front of me. To get those provisions that were mentioned out of the bill. Again, so it's broad support of the initiative, and you could probably just leave it at that, and I'll do my job to get out the bad stuff.
Thanks, Gwen.
But it's the exceptions to, it's all these lists of things.
Yeah,
that towns can't
essentially
do.
it was saying, hey, you have authority, Brattleboro, whatever town, but you can't do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, Y, J, K, L, M,
Okay,
N, P,
object to
so-
all of those, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go, please.
I want to give a quick explanation of the backstory to that for the benefit of anybody who's listening and who might want to get involved in this advocacy work. So the bill that was originally proposed as S106 and its companion in the House the idea was to have an experiment, to have a pilot project for 5 years where a handful of municipalities would be approved by this committee that was proposed, to exercise a greater degree of local control over local issues. And the language was really quite broad so that it would be a good, full experiment. And then the state could judge for itself whether this was improving the governance broadly in the state, following the lead of the example of the pilot project down in West Virginia, where after 5 years of 4 municipalities being allowed to exercise some additional authority, they loved it so much they had 34 municipalities for the second 5 years. And after that, as Gwen indicated, now they've adopted home rule. So, we're encouraging the legislature to look on this as an opportunity to, take a small step, a cautious step with only a few municipalities, but allow it to be a real experiment. What came out of the Senate instead was, more or less the same structure of a pilot program, but with 2.5 pages of limitations on what authority can be exercised. And so the concern is that's not really a good legitimate exercise anymore, or a good legitimate experiment anymore. It's going to be actually just sort of a different way of exercising very limited authority. And in fact, in this case, under sort of extra scrutiny by being a participant in the pilot project. To speak for Senator White, which I probably shouldn't, but I've had a lot of conversations with her about this, and she doesn't have the opportunity to be here tonight. She's disappointed by that outcome too, but you do the best you can with what you got, and that's what she got in the Senate through that process. And it was great that it got voted out positively by, not a razor-thin margin, 21-8. And so that's where we launch from for this session when we go over to the House, is to try to get a better S-106, try to get it not as laden with so many different restrictions, because people like Senator White will fight in the resolution of the differences between those two documents. We'll fight over on the Senate side to adopt the better bill we hope to get out of the House.
That was very good. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Liz?
I'm done.
You never even started.
That's the beauty of it.
That was the Daniel, you haven't said much. You have anything
Good,
you
I'm
want
happy to
us in?
listen.
You're also done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got a lot of experts in the room. You
Do you
don't need
feel
my
like
opinion.
you have further things that you want to add to what you've brought to our table, a very important topic you've brought tonight?
I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
We want to say thank you.
Thank you for fighting.
Thanks for the local option tax that you'll be dropping on our town.
Brattleboro's been in one of the examples of this sort of incubator for change, and sort of, whether it be your, plastic bags, ordinance or otherwise, or even just how you function as a town government. I mean, you're a model of what could be, and when you feed sort of a structure like that where you empower those at this level to do what's best for the community, really good things happen. So I know your town manager doesn't love being the center of attention for this discussion and likes to have, but truthfully speaking, Brattleboro's doing the right things, and having the tough discussions and struggling with the same issues that other communities are struggling with, but like pushing forward and not saying, and like I was saying earlier, not taking your foot off the acceleration and moving forward. And so thank you for that.
Thanks. Molly?
I just want to say, Gwen does a fabulous job. We're in really good hands with Gwen and Karen Horn. And, VLCT is very well respected in the State House. And so, I know that, just wanted to acknowledge that. And also, she's just fun to work with.
I can tell.
Molly, thank you for
I feel good.
Yeah.
I see you, Ricky. Do you want to come forward? Ricky and Pudge.
Hi, I'm Ricky from District 2, and I've continued having 3 major concerns with the proposal. The first being that we shouldn't be relying on senators to motion this forward, and that I would propose us to hold a public vote and see what direct democracy would result in, because the way that this proposal is written, restricting to only 10 municipalities to apply, whereas there's over 250 in Vermont, is just moving towards a more local representation of fascism. And what we could do as an alternative of the 12-member commission that's numbered in the proposal, instead of those being appointed by anyone, I would really encourage us to have those be elected positions too by direct public democracy. Do you have any response to that by the select board or
Do you wish to
the
answer?
table?
The proposal in front of the bill that you're looking at is sort of the best. I don't know how to word this. It's many minds in many levels of power have sort of put that structure together for other commissions and other proposals that work at the state and municipal level. The options that you're bringing up are interesting and insightful to sort of help the discussion about the larger model of pushing this forward, but getting all 246 communities to sort of support that. It's not up to me. It's up to the communities themselves to respond to that. So I can't really speak to whether we could support that or not support that because it's not my decision to make. The League of Cities and Towns represents the municipalities, so I just am sort of the voice. So I can't really answer that question directly other than to say that it's kind of out of my power.
I think Tim has a clarifier.
I would just point out that at RTM, we did vote for overwhelming, strong support for this action and this direction. So there was a very strong public vote to support what we're doing and what the efforts you're making.
And for the record, we would love to have every community be involved, and that's the end goal. But sometimes you have to start off small to sort of lead the horse to water and hopefully make it drink. So
I think the public is ready, and I'm really disappointed by the last 60 years of representative town meeting that not being a form of direct democracy at all. The public should not be entitling people to vote on our behalf or for us. We really have our own voice that we're ready to use.
Did you say you had another point, Ricky?
Does anyone have a response to that? Does anyone have an argue against that? Does anyone not support what I'm saying?
I don't believe that this board is fascist, nor do I believe that our state legislature is fascist.
How do you define fascism?
Oh, okay.
That's getting a little off topic.
He's making a statement of what he is not,
Well,
so
you-
define that. What are you
mentioned
not?
earlier that we were fascists, and that's not the case.
Fascism is when there is a body making decisions for the majority. The majority can make decisions for ourselves. And that's through fair elections where we could direct the ballot ourselves. We should be voting on these ballot issues.
Thank you, Ricky. I actually support direct democracy over representative town meeting myself.
Thank you.
But I don't support the fascist thing. Any closing comments tonight from any of us? Thanks.
No?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you
Thanks for
very
coming.
much for coming.
Enjoy your stay in Brattleboro.
Great.
Yeah. Okay.
Drop downtown.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
all of this, I've buried the agenda. Here we are. So now still,
I'm sorry. I was trying to whisper in your ear, Patrick.
Patrick,
On Renewable.
oh, thank you. So now we're going to move on to item B under new business, which is investment in local renewable energy projects. And for that, I will look to Patrick Moreland. Bye, Molly.
My surprise. Good evening, everybody. So the memo that's included in the board packet will start off by reminding everybody that at representative town meeting in 2018, Mr. Dimes put forward a resolution under other business asking the select board to commit to purchasing renewable or to purchasing electricity produced from renewable sources and offered cow power as a method of achieving that. At a select board meeting not long after that town meeting, staff was asked to take a look at cow power, to do an analysis of our energy usage, and to come back. And in May of that year, 2018, staff did just that. Cow power is, of course, a program of Green Mountain Power. In a nutshell, when you're a consumer of electricity and you subscribe to cow power, nothing really changes. Your power is the same coming through the socket as it always was. What's different is you pay a 4 cent per kilowatt hour premium to Green Mountain Power for that electricity that you consume. Green Mountain Power uses those funds to provide an additional subsidy to some renewable energy projects that have signed on with them, all of which exist in northern Vermont. Many of them are farms, and so there's a variety of different renewable energy projects. There's a list of them here in the memo. I don't recall the names of them, but there's a series of farms that produce renewable energy and are paid a premium for the electricity that they generate by virtue of the 4 cents that the customers contribute. Staff recommended at that time that the board consider a possible alternative, which was at the conclusion of each fiscal year, we conduct an analysis of our energy consumption, and then we make a determination as to the percentage or the kilowatt hours which are derived from sources which are not renewable. There's on page 3 of the memo, there's a little bit of a chart. Before I start walking us through the chart, I would just remind everybody that the 18 largest accounts, electric accounts by consumption that the town has, have been assigned to the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District solar project, which came into being just about a year ago, and is, I believe, the largest single solar field in the state of Vermont. When you assign electric accounts to a solar project such as that, you need to sort of hedge your bets so that you're not ending up purchasing credits that are in excess of the amount of electricity that you use. So you, generally speaking, assign about 80% of that account to the solar project. The remaining 20% obviously isn't coming from that solar project. And in addition to that, so let me just back it up a little bit. If you look at the middle box, among our solar projects, I've broken out it out by 80%, which is from the solar, and 20% which isn't. That leaves about 469,000 kilowatt hours. If you add that in the third box to the sum of all kilowatt hours not assigned to any of our solar projects, that's about 551,000 kilowatt hours, you end up with a little over a million, or 1,020,820 of kilowatt hours, which are I'm sorry, this is a little complicated for me, and as I'm sure it is for you, which are not derived from the solar array at Wyndham Solid Waste Management. Next, we recognize from our communication with Green Mountain Power that 60% of their base electricity is derived from renewables. So we apply 40% to this 1,020,820, and what we end up with is 408,328 kilowatt hours not derived from renewable sources. Then, if we apply the same premium that we would pay if we were purchasing cow power at 4 cents per kilowatt hours, we end up with $16,333.12. And so the proposal, or the concept before you this evening, is that with your blessing, staff would move forward soliciting feedback from local renewable energy projects, asking them about how much energy do they produce, what's it used for, are there any other ancillary benefits that accrue to the community or beyond just the off-takers, and then we bring that back to the board and we make payment in some fashion to the project that the board deems to be most worthy.
Excellent. Liz?
I love this idea. First of all, I really like the analysis of your weeding out the various sums that are sustainable in some fashion or other, and then getting to this amount that we would be paying cow power, which I think is a really large markup. And then you're saying, let's support a local project. So it's sustainable and it's local. And I think it's a wonderful idea.
I agree with Liz. I think it's fantastic. It's a no-brainer for me.
Thanks for doing the math.
I
Yeah.
apologize for the difficulty in explaining it.
It's okay. It's pretty complicated.
You did fine.
It is. a
No,
little
you did
complicated.
great.
Yep.
I have a comment
I
and a
understood
question.
it.
Yes, sir.
So looking at it a different way to someone who's like not looking at this chart, or
Yes.
actually it doesn't help sometimes if you're not really paying attention. No, not your fault. That's not. That was not. I was not intended to throw your chart under the bus.
No offense taken.
It can be confusing, right? So what we're essentially doing is instead of paying a premium of 0.04 on the dollar or 4 cents on the kilowatt hour to northern interest and northern farms, but we're trying to funnel that into a local project. The goal by which is to be able to say we are, in our municipal energy use, 100% renewable. Is that pretty accurate? Because that's another way to look at it.
I think that's pretty accurate. I'm not an energy expert, but I think this rationale is meaningful. And, if we're going to be paying a premium to somebody, there are good folks up in northern Vermont, but there are good projects in Brattleboro, and perhaps there's a good project out there right now that could really use our help, and we just don't know about it. So
Sure.
Love it.
My only question, and certainly I don't want to question any of the math, but the 80% that we started with on what we assigned to municipal electricity, what's the science behind that? Why not 85 or 88 or 90?
I think it's certainly a judgment call, and what you want to do is not overcommit yourself, right? So we're going to continue to move forward with projects, some of which we know, some of which we haven't even conceived of yet. But there's a reasonable. It's not unreasonable to believe that we're not going to move forward with other energy-saving measures, right? And so hopefully our overall electric consumption will reduce as time goes on. And so you don't wish to be assigning more value, because you need to commit certain accounts to the solar field, and then certain values within it, and you can find yourself in a position where you've overcommitted and you're actually paying for something you're not then receiving.
Yeah.
So in an effort to try and avoid that, you sort of hedge your bets, believing that over time we're gonna adopt other additional energy saving measures, and hopefully our overall electric consumption will come down, bringing that kind of closer to the 80% level.
Yeah, I was just throwing it out there that let's make sure it's best practice to be at that level instead
At
of
the
85.
time that, when we considered the contract of the waste district to do this, all of that was unknown, but we were looking at a multi-year contract, commitment to buy this much
right.
electricity, so.
Right.
Leaving the cushion was.
Sounds prudent.
I believe it's a 20-year time frame. So over that 20 years, hopefully,
We'll achieve
we can adopt different things. We can
Hopefully
reduce our electric
We'll find out 80
consumption.
wasn't enough because we cut 20% of our usage, but we'll see.
I have a quick question.
Daniel, so-
Do we have like a sense of the criteria that we'll use to judge these various projects?
I think the judgment of the select board.
Might
All
be
right.
up to us.
Maybe the sustainability coordinator gets to weigh in?
Yeah, Daniel.
Energy
Maybe
committee.
we should give it to the energy committee, like we give the art things to the art committee and have them consider it.
Have a committee?
Bring
do something?
recommendations.
Sounds good.
Peter has a
We'll
plan.
be very pleased to handle it that way. I think that makes a lot of sense. But the path we were on, we were actually feeling some sense of urgency because of the fact that we had to wait. This concept was originally approved about a year ago, and then we had to wait until the end of the fiscal year to be able to run the calculation. And so here we are a few months later bringing it to you. So we were going to move forward very quickly to solicit information about these different projects. I don't think there's any necessity to do that, and if you'd rather we wait the extra, couple of months to get a sustainability coordinator hired and get them here and get their feet on the ground and then work with the energy committee so that, sometime in the winter this comes back to you, that makes a lot of sense to me, but you should know that it will require that delay.
I think it sounds like a nice idea, but I don't feel like waiting.
Yeah, you're responding because this was approved at town meeting. or discussed at town
Yeah,
meeting?
it came out of originally the town meeting that was a year and a half ago, but then in the follow-up to that town meeting, the select board approved the concept of doing a local investment rather than cow power. And so everybody understood that there would be a delay until the end of the fiscal year so we could know how much that investment would be, and here we are. And
Well,
all
I
we
think
need
we
is
should-
your direction
yeah.
about whether to keep moving as fast as we can or whether to wait for the coordinator.
I would vote to go ahead.
It might be flaunting the will of the previous select board if you
Yeah.
delay this.
I think we should go ahead and you know, this sustainability coordinator can weigh in when he or she takes office.
Or if we start doing it and we feel like we're not the right place for it, we can always then say, yeah, we should have waited for this, let's wait for the sustainability coordinator. I wanna see right now what's out there, I don't wanna wait.
Okay, I want to see projects, but
I
I
wanna see
want
projects.
considerations beyond financial to be part of our decision.
Heard, yeah, I mostly just wanna see the projects, I'm excited to see what's out there.
Okay.
And then we can figure out what to do with it.
I just have to confess that when I heard cow power, I thought it had something to do with methane gas, and
Why
I
would
was
you
very
think
wrong.
that? That's what anybody would think.
That's
that's
why
what it
it's
is.
farms, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I believe so.
But I hear if you feed the cows seaweed, it makes a big difference.
I didn't know that.
I wish.
Good.
I don't.
Very good.
Please don't take this as being snarky. But I do wish that Kurt Dimes had stuck around because this
Because it was
did
his initiative.
originate with his resolution, so.
Well, hopefully he's watching from home.
Is there room for questions?
Yeah. Please come up, Mark.
Mark again. When we say like, okay, Brattleboro's getting so much percentage from renewable sources, are we talking about like Green Mountain Power telling us we're getting it from renewable sources, or is there a link between those? I mean, are we getting it from renewable sources, or are we getting it from Green Mountain Power?
Patrick, do you want to be interrogated or you want Peter?
I think I know the answer.
I'd be happy to answer. You know, a portion of the base electricity provided by Green Mountain Power to customers here in Vermont is procured from renewable sources. And so, you know, what this analysis does is it says, you know, those kilowatt hours that we purchase from Green Mountain Power, if 60% of the power that they sell to their customers is derived from renewable sources, then 60% of those kilowatt hours we ought to be able to claim are renewable.
Great, that actually answers my question. I also want to caution all of us in this town that this sustainability coordinator is going to be very busy, and I think it's poor practice and poor form to use that position as a bureaucratic vortex into which all climate action in this town goes to be in a vortex. They're going to be very busy, so doing things outside of that job is a very good idea.
Thanks, Mark. Other feedback from community members? Okay. Do we need a motion on this item?
Please.
I've long since lost my agenda thing.
Oh, I'd love to make this motion.
Do it, Daniel.
Go ahead.
Can we do it with that, David? Yeah, I guess. I move that we authorize staff to solicit letters of interest from existing or imminent renewable energy projects in Brattleboro for a town contribution of $16,333.12.
Thank you, Daniel. Daniel has made that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0 because Daniel was not in the room. David was not in the room. Thank you. Okay, still under new business, and we move on to the FY19 year-end financial reports, final but unaudited. Peter.
Yes, so the detailed report is in the backup materials that have been provided to the select board and have been available online on the town's website. I will just cite from the memorandum that I provided to you dated September 11th, a few of the highlights, and then be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the line-by-line details. But most importantly, overall, we were just shy of $400,000 to the good this year. So it's not technically a surplus because we had planned to use $770,000 worth of fund balance in this budget, and we ended up only having to use $376,000 and $582 of fund balance. And so the management of the budget in a way that we had less expenditures than we were budgeted to spend. We had greater revenues than what we had forecast to receive, caused us to be to the tune of $393,418, able to avoid using all of that fund balance. And what that means is, as we approach the upcoming budget process, this $393,418 will have fallen back into the general fund balance. And when we get looking at particularly capital expenses and other decisions to be made in the upcoming budget process, we'll have a little bit more flexibility because of that. We've had discussion at this moment in time in this report in prior years about the magnitude of these, I'm going to call it a surplus just to make the nomenclature simpler for the conversation. We have had surpluses in the last 5 years as high as $900,000, and this is actually the smallest one that we've had in the last 5 years. The years when we were larger, we had, I think, a 750 and a 900. That resulted from very significant changes that were made in town programs during the course of a year that resulted in very significant under expenditures. We expect more typically to be in the $300,000 to $500,000 a year range. As our budget goes up, maybe a little higher than that will, be a normal level of surplus. We shoot for being in that 2 to 3% sweet spot, and the reason for that is if we were shooting for less than 2, any kind of bad surprise, a really bad winter, this budget was actually affected by a moderately bad winter where we did overexpend our winter roads maintenance budget. But if we had a really bad winter or some other kind of significant event in the community that impacted us to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, it wouldn't take much if we were operating on that thinner margin to actually fall into deficit, which would be a real problem. And then we're drawing off a fund balance that doesn't really exist for that purpose, and we'd be eating into our 10% sort of rainy day fund. So what we try to do is always have a little bit of a surplus, and we shoot for that around 2 to 3%. This year's was 2.2%, solidly right there, because it allows us then to roll that money into next year and use it as far as as part of the decision making for how to address the needs of the community, particularly as it relates to capital going forward. Part of our strategy there, we'll talk about that in the long-term plan item in a moment, is by budgeting in real time $1 million a year of revenue to be spent on capital and relying on some amount of surplus from the prior year to roll over. We hope to be in a position where we can be routinely spending $1.25 million, $1.5 million, because our needs still exceed that. So a couple of other highlights from this past year, reasons why this $393,418 occurred. Staffing in the police department costs about $156,000 less than was budgeted because of vacancies there, and that's the net of the savings in the salaries and then the over expenditure of overtime for the police officers who picked up that slack. The town's health insurance program cost about $78,000 less than was budgeted. That's primarily because of our the savings that have accrued from the implementation of the HRA portion of the budget, where we assume some of the risk and don't fully insure for all the costs of the plan. The meals, alcohol, rooms, local option tax exceeded budget by $72,000. This is an important one to note. We wouldn't expect to have happen again because we had a couple of years in a row. This was the second of the 2 years in a row where we had a significant over collection. And based on that, when we saw that coming, in the current year's budget, we actually increased the budget very substantially. So we would expect that any excess rooms and meals tax in next year's final report would be much smaller than $70,000. The investment income, because of the change in our method of investment, increased by actually came in over budget by $64,000. And staffing within the town manager's office was $57,000 under budget, unfortunately, because it took us a while to hire Sally Nix, who we're really delighted to have on board as the HR director. But because for most of the last fiscal year that position was vacant, there was a substantial savings in town manager's office salaries. I guess that's probably a good place for me to stop and just ask whether you have questions.
I have a question.
Yeah, Liz?
I just wanted to make sure that the intent for the additional 1% sales tax
Yes.
was to reduce the property tax, and
Yes.
that will maintain that intent going forward.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Which is
forgive me
kinda
for
hard
giving
to do,
a
but, yeah.
sort of town manager's dance answer to that, but that's actually, that's fully our intent. We understand the context in which it was approved. And so in the budget that we as staff will propose to you about 6 weeks from now, we will have that in mind, but where we go from there in the couple of months that follow is up to you, and then where we go after that is up to town meeting, so.
So we need to keep it, you need to keep it in mind, we need to keep
Yes,
it in
ma'am.
mind, and town manager needs, town meeting
Yeah, it's a long
needs to
process,
be-
and it involves a lot of public participation, and so I don't presume we'll necessarily end there. I can assure you that's where we'll start.
Good answer.
Thank you.
I want to actually take this time to remind members of our community that you're about to tonight hear the words financial, budget, financial 3 times in a row. And you just heard Peter say that he'll be bringing us a budget within 6 weeks. As we're moving into the fall, you can anticipate that you will see less kind of social needs items on the agendas as we really refocus our efforts into hearing from department heads, hearing from town managers, from all of our departments about what budgets need to look like. There's going to be a lot of back and forth on that, and we're going to be spending the bulk of the fall preparing the budget so that it can be sent off to representative town meeting. Generally, I believe that needs to be finished by January, is that
Yes,
true?
we'll finish by the end of January.
Right, so we have a time constraint, we have a lot of departments, we have a lot of work to do to make sure that our budget is reflective of community needs, of department needs, and of taxpayer needs as well. And so you can rest assured and be forewarned that that is going to be the bulk of our focus through the fall.
I love it when Banker Brandy comes out.
She only comes out in the fall. Any other comments on the board, questions on the board?
No idea why that got me so excited for budget season.
Staffing savings, right, or things that cost us
Yeah.
less, right? It's the police staffing
Yeah.
cost saving is because we're understaffed.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah,
Not
that's
a
not.
huge reason to celebrate.
It's not a happy
We'd
reason.
much rather not.
Right.
save
Yeah,
that
we
money,
don't want that savings.
But,
I
yeah,
just want
that's-
to kind of
You are dead right.
point it out.
Would members of the community seated tonight like to have any questions or comments on this report? Franz? And Ricky's here too.
Or Russ.
Okay.
It's like the
Or Russ.
Maytag repairman over there.
Okay, so there's no motion needed, and we're gonna move right into the monthly financial report for August.
Yes, and of the 3 financial items tonight, this is clearly the simplest and easiest, and it's just good news. We're 2 months into the fiscal year, and there's nothing scary to report.
We're not in the hole.
Excellent.
We're 16.7% of the fiscal year through, and slightly under 16% expended, and revenues are, as expected at this time of year. We're fine. I mean, I can go into greater detail if you'd like me to, but I think in the interest of time, it'd probably be good to move on to long-term plan.
Sounds like a plan to me, fellow board members.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
One super detail-oriented question. I do have other more detail-oriented. This is most top level. I looked at the sales tax revenue line, and I see that that is 1.46%
Yes.
of what we project, and
Yes.
we are 16.7% into the year.
Yes.
So how do those things?
Yep.
The state has it.
Good catch. So there's a delay in the, those funds being passed on by the state. We actually were puzzled by the first check we received from the state because it seemed to relate to the period of time prior to July 1st. We weren't really able to get a good straight answer out of the state, and what we actually think might have happened is some of the businesses might have started reporting in their filings for that last quarter of the last fiscal year,
7%.
instead of waiting for July 1st so it might not be just the July 1st and forward period that they filed for. They might actually have submitted a small amount of money from receipts prior to July 1st. We don't know for sure that that's what it was because the state wasn't able to confirm that. What we know is this is not yet representative of anything that we can draw conclusions from. And probably even that first quarter is going to have gaps in it. So while there may have been some folks who filed early, there's likely to be some folks who have to play catch up. It's a new system, and it's going to be a while before we see sort of a steady trend.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Oh my lord, where is it? It's about sidewalk repairs.
Yes.
Which is the bread and butter of this work.
Sidewalk.
Yeah.
I could have sworn you said cyborg.
No.
Oh.
Cyborg repairs, yes.
Where are you?
I am on page 11 of 15.
Yep.
Probably 20 years.
When do sidewalk repairs happen?
So this is a moment when I wish Steve was present, but there
it's
was
happening right now
no reason why he
on
needed
Elliott.
to be. They happen sometimes in conjunction with other capital projects. So the timing of that would be, maybe when a road is being repaved, they'll go out and they'll do sidewalks on that road just prior to the repaving. But then there's other times when it's just like a really bad segment of sidewalk and it's its own project and they find time in the work schedule. There's really not a single particular time of year. If Steve were here, he might be able to give you a something that feels a little more scientific than that. But what I know to be true is unlike paving, where we do sort of 2 batches of it each year, sidewalk work is a little more sporadic.
Okay, Steve can email me. I know he's watching at home.
Sure. And in fact, let me say from staff's point of view, we'd be happy to answer the additional questions you have tonight, or I'd be happy to talk with you offline about the additional things that you're interested in.
Great, thank you.
Excuse me. Okay, looks like we're moving on to the long-term financial plan, which I already turned my page to. I realized.
So this one, I'll ask the board if you'd like a relatively full presentation of it, and if you would, I'll apologize in advance that it might take me 15 or 20 minutes, but there's a lot here, and it's 5 minutes of 9. If you would like that level of presentation, I'm happy to provide it. Otherwise, I'll be much more summary.
What do you think we have left in this meeting outside of this?
Long.
Not too much.
Long.
Long? Really?
Schedule in.
No,
Take 20 and then we have 20.
I'd like-
say take
I'd
20.
like the
longer
full-
presentation.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying that was on a
Yeah,
I thought you were
we
saying
have,
lunch.
and it's also
Yeah.
the table setter. There's a reason we
Yeah,
do the
let's hear
long-term
it.
plan,
Yeah.
which is so that we ground ourselves
Yes.
in
this
where
is-
we are in
Yes.
financial condition in the big picture before we go into
Yeah.
the decisions for the year ahead.
I think we had a
When we-
misunderstanding.
I'm
in the
sorry.
comment.
Yeah.
When we set the agenda, we intentionally hoped
Yeah.
that we would be at
Perfect.
this point.
So
or
that's what I
earlier.
thought. I want to make sure we're all on the same page. So,
Great.
with that advance apology,
Drum roll,
I'll take
please.
15 or 20 minutes and walk
Yes.
you through it.
And if you need a break, we can ask questions in between.
Sure, yeah, interrupt me at any time, please. I will say again for the folks who are watching at home, if you have access to the town's website, this material is on that website. And it's item E of the new business part of the agenda, and there's a relatively detailed memorandum that I'm going to be speaking to that served as cover to a 5-year forecast of the town's budget in the normal budget format, the line item format that we review it as an annual budget.
Oh.
As of this afternoon,
Kicking it off.
if you went to the website,
Yep.
and over on the right-hand side, there's a little place you could click on long-term financial plan.
Yes.
If you did that this afternoon, you got the previous year's long-term financial plan. You have to look in the material for this meeting in order to find this long-term financial plan, if anybody is doing that at home.
Apologize for that.
Okay, yeah. It'd
Not
be
very
nice
helpful
to,
to you tonight, but we'll correct that tomorrow morning.
okay.
But you're such a good
But
sleuth.
not much of it is different, just 1 year would be different.
But what you're saying is
The
if you follow
sustainability
along,
coordinator help with this.
if you're following along live, you can find it. You just have to go into this evening's documents.
That's right.
Thanks.
So we always start at sort of the ending and then work our way back to it. Because every year, the bottom line of the budget from the community's perspective is, what's happening with the tax rate. And so what I can tell you is that the sum total of everything that's going on in this long-term financial plan projects that the increase for FY21, which will be our next year's budget, in the property tax rate would be 3.5% or 4.4 cents. I should provide the caveat that is in the memorandum for those who read it through more thoroughly, that each of these estimates of property tax increase is higher than we actually think it will end up. And the reason for that is we purposely try to be cautious on both sides of the equation. So we try not to be overly aggressive and optimistic about revenues, and we try not to be overly optimistic and take the risk of being too low on expenditures. Ideally, if we're doing that well, then scary trends will pop out so we can see which parts of the budget need our extra attention to make sure that we manage them so they don't become financial problems for the town. But overall, we'll end up in a place that's a little better than projected, because you always want to be there instead of a little worse than projected and have to tax people more than predicted. So with that caveat, we're looking at 4.4 cents and 3.5% for next year. And the years that follow vary between 2.6 cents and a 1.9% increase, and as high as 4.2 cents or a 3% increase.
And we can't just skip to fiscal year 23 and get the 1.9.
No, wouldn't that be great? So
there's a box on your tax form.
But one thing you will see when we start wrestling with the details of the FY21 budget is we got to be really careful. One of the reasons why we try to be steady about things like capital equipment replacement is because if we take a year off and have to play catch up, that can be really painful. So we could have a year, for instance, let me just say arbitrarily, with no relation to actual decisions we're going to make. If we said, boy, we don't want to do 4.4 cents next year, that's a lot, let's do 2 cents. Well, that just means that we're either going to end up cutting things that matter, programs and activities that matter to the community, or we're going to have a much more significant tax increase in the next year after that or the next year after that in order to keep up with it.
Or we're going to find a few things that aren't as important to our community through vigorous discussion.
Thank you. Or we find those, or we find additional revenues. I will say that historically, finding the things that don't so much matter and finding the additional revenues have both proven really challenging. So it's part of the hard work we do, but you got to find quite a bit of that for it to have a meaningful impact on these numbers.
Sure
One
wish
of
we
the
could
things-
find some revenues from S106.
There you go.
Pages 7 through 10. Sorry, go ahead, Liz.
One of the things is, investing our surplus, and it has become a good moneymaker.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yep. Which is already reflected in these numbers, though. So that was a
Yeah.
real nice kick to the budget over the last couple of fiscal years, and now it's reflected in this
And now
five-year
there's
forecast
nothing
as
left. Yeah.
steady as we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still there, and it's still there in the bigger number each year, so it's a good thing. But we don't see a benefit to the tax rate projections because we've already experienced that benefit. Another way to keep in perspective the increases, which we always try to keep as small as possible, but yet even increases of this magnitude relate to an average over this period of an increase in $72 per year or $18 per quarter for more than half of the property homeowners. So for single-family residences in town and for condominiums, so multifamily that's individually owned, the average homeowner will see an increase of $72 per year or less in their taxes to fund everything that is going on in this report. The non-tax revenues, we assume will be flat. Sometimes we do find ways to modestly increase those. We'll always keep looking for that. The five-year forecast presumes that there'll be no increase in those, and so that's one of the ways in which this is a conservative forecast. I quote myself here from the memo, we've been exceedingly cautious, and I said that on purpose about the projection of meals and rooms taxes and local option sales taxes. In both cases, trends would indicate that we can expect more than just absolutely flat on those, but we know that the economy can be fickle, and we wanted to be careful here to not predict any future growth in that. So one thing is that our initial estimate for the local option sales tax is just that. It's an estimate. We have no experience with it yet, so we wanted to be careful there. But even with meals and rooms, where we've seen steady increases over the years, we thought it would not be responsible to project additional steady increases in the future. So this report predicts those to be flat. This is the first time that you've seen in any of our financial reporting projections of the impact of having employees begin to share in the cost of the premiums for the health insurance benefit for employees. That's a really normal sort of an arrangement for most employers, but the town several years back in 2012, 2013, changed to a high deductible plan, and at that time, part of that transition was that employees no longer contributed anything towards the premium. Over the 6 or 7 years since then, the cost of that benefit has increased substantially because we had switched to a system where employee costs were fixed, or at least the maximum out-of-pocket cost for employees, households were fixed, and all of those increases were borne by the town. We approached the employees, the 4 unions and the non-union group this past year and talked about a way in which to reintroduce as gently as possible cost sharing. The select board agreed and the unions agreed that that would be 1% of the premium paid by the employees in FY21, 3% in FY22, and 5% in FY23. We have reflected that in these forecasts and reflected that 5% also in 24 and 25. The forecast reflects the continuing commitment to invest at least $1 million a year into capital. So that's the figure that is shown in the capital. Again, we would rely upon, as we have, sort of the system that we've established over these last few years, $1 million of real-time revenue being devoted to capital, and then relying on that prior year surplus to carry us to a greater degree of investment. Some years, because of those larger surpluses and because of the great needs we've had, we've been as high as $2 million commitment to capital. In other years, we've been as low as about 1.3, 1.4. This will be a year, again, when I think we'll be at about 1.3 or 1.4 when we bring forward the proposed budget. We assume no use of fund balance. That's another thing that makes this conservative, but the reason for that is because we can't accurately predict years ahead, when we're going to have good winters or harsh winters or so on. We don't know how much fund balance will roll over, how much annual surplus there will be, but because we expect them to be in the range of 2 or 3%, they've been as high as 4 or 5% in recent memory. We again expect to be able to make that greater commitment to capital without having projected use of fund balance in this forecast. We anticipate townwide increase in employee salaries of 4% for FY21, 2.5% to 3% for the following years in the forecast. The reason for the slightly larger increase in FY21 is the impact of the new collective bargaining agreements that have been approved this year, and then sort of more steady during the additional 2 years of those collective bargaining agreements, and then the 2 additional years of the forecast.
May I ask a question about that?
Yes.
So because those negotiations happen, or decisions happen in executive session, the community as a whole doesn't really have much of a knowledge base with regards to those salary increases, why they're that amount, what the basis for the decisions happen to be. And so I'm wondering if at some point we could hear more about that. I don't know if that's more of the budget discussion as opposed to the long-term financial plan discussion. But I get it that that's a difficult process. But I think at least after the fact, we need to know what happened.
We'll be happy to do that. And the other thing is, you had made appropriately a comment during the approval of some of the agreements earlier this year that it would be helpful to the public to have the agreements. Once we do reach a tentative agreement with the unions and an item is ready to come to the board for final approval, that that each particular collective bargaining agreement that's ready for board approval be available to the public for review for more than just the weekend prior to the meeting. These are complicated documents, and we are happy to do that. We will make a habit out of that as we go forward.
I like that.
Really? I said that?
You did?
Sorry? I remember.
Yeah, I heard you just say it.
No, I do
Thanks for
remember that. Yes,
understanding
thank you,
my
Peter.
Yeah.
idea. Ricky, I see your hand up.
I really value these financial reports and would appreciate them being scheduled separate from select board meetings at a more reasonable hour of the day, like in the afternoon, because trying to go over these figures this late at night is pretty difficult for me personally. I have sleep apnea, so just my capacity to pay attention, as much as I want to follow along with this, I might assume for other people as well might be better within business hours. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Tough
Yeah.
for us, but of course,
Yeah.
many of us are working full-time jobs as well.
Yeah, unfortunately. But part of what will be good is having these discussions at least earlier, closer to 6 o'clock through the fall is gonna really help all of us a lot. It's hard, I'm having a hard time too.
The funding of retirement benefits, the town's contribution, so for the employee pension system, employees contribute into the fund, and the town contributes on employees' behalf into the fund. The employer contribution made by the town is projected to increase during this 5-year period by $58,000. I want to note that we still haven't reached the point where the current year expense exceeds the FY17 expense. It'll be another year or two before we get to that point. We made substantial changes in the plan at that time, actually improved the plan. It was just a really great win-win situation where we were able to join the VEMRS program, the Vermont Municipal Employee Retirement System, so that employees would have a defined benefit pension that they can count on in retirement at lower cost to the town than what the town had been providing as a contribution towards a defined contribution system where employees had to save their own funds for retirement. So the taxpayers won, the employees won, and we still haven't reached yet the level of expense that we had prior to FY17.
Right.
The rate of increase overall for employee benefits has stabilized, but an area where we would expect to have substantial additional increases in the future is in the health insurance program. And the reason for that is that we've had a couple of years, actually 3 years, where the creation of the health reimbursement arrangement enabled the town to really contain cost increases, and then we had actually 1 year when our premium went down, even though the overall cost of the program went up, but because we were bearing, taking on some of the risk with the HRA, and we had 2 years of very small increases. Last year, of course, was the opposite of that, with a substantial increase in the premium. That led to the discussions that we had with the employees, that has led to the agreement that employees will again contribute to the premium. But we do predict that going forward, health insurance costs will drive the increases in employee benefit, the overall employee benefit increase that's forecast to be about 3.4%. The departmental forecast, departmental expenses is sort of everything else. When you think about, all the different the salaries and the benefits and the capital and the different categories of expenditure that are all pretty specifically identifiable. And then there's just, the basic operations of town government. So the office supplies and the costs of maintaining and operating the buildings. So the departments that actually are housed in their own particular building have some facility expenses that, for instance, some of the departments in this building don't have because the municipal center stands on it as a program of its own. So those expenses in total across all the departments are expected to increase by approximately $360,000 over the course of the 5-year period. That increase is approximately about a 3% increase a year. Yep.
If you're going to the next one, can I just underline something?
Please.
Primarily because of a new public works stormwater program? Is that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have called that out.
Because I just want to
Yep.
underline that for
Yeah.
the public, that.
Thank you.
This is a mandate from the state that's basically unfunded.
Yep.
And unfunded mandate should be a phrase we use a lot, just like
I agree.
home rule.
They
and-
promised they weren't gonna do that.
Unfunded mandate, which
Yeah.
means we have to do it, we get no money for it.
Exactly, and so actually, so I just, in the spirit of truth, we were talking earlier tonight about making sure we
Yeah.
put it out there. So we do get some funding. It's not uncommon that this phenomenon that's happening with this program is how a new state program rolls out. So the state will only occasionally say, municipalities, you all have to do this, this, and this now, and not fund anything. One of the things about being a Dillon's Rule state is there's some sort of paternalistic interest that we usually do get from Montpelier, where they'll say, we're gonna require you to do this, and so we're gonna provide you some funding. And almost always, the funding is not just a little, but materially inadequate. And that's what's happening here. So there is some funding that's being provided by the state. It's not nearly enough for us to do all the things we need to do to comply with the program. And that's why it's going to be it's going to cause an increase in our budget over the coming years.
Thanks for that.
No, thank you for calling it out.
Thank you for bringing it up.
And the next area is another one of those areas. This is not state mandated, although actually, I mean, the law it comes from the state, but it's not their fault. It is our experience in workers' comp that has caused us to realize that that's an area where we need to pay more attention. We have been paying more attention there. We have been making some strides. But as we've talked about in prior years, it takes about a 5-year cycle before you really start to see the financial benefits of that.
We're getting there. It's almost
we are
5
getting
years
there.
now, yeah.
But the actuaries use multiple years of experience in order to calculate rate increases or rate, well, I don't know, it would be decreases, but the magnitude of rate increases will reflect multi-year periods, and we're still sort of trailing off some of our bad years of experience that are causing us to predict conservatively 10% increase in workers' compensation expenses for each year. We do think that's actually a reasonable figure for the first couple of years of this forecast. We would certainly hope that as we get to the later years of the forecast that that's higher than what we're going to experience.
So, so you're trying for each workplace to be safer?
Yes, it's a combination of better work in preventing injuries from occurring, and also we've instituted a significantly different and better policy for how we handle actual workers' comp claims. So both in the management of the medical treatment that an employee might need in order to make sure that they get the best care and get heal as quickly as possible. And statistics are really clear that when an employee is out on workers' comp, the longer they're out, the less, the worse the long-term performance of both physical recovery and the rest of their employment goes for that employee. So it's in the employee's best interest and in the town's best interest that we get people back to work as quickly as possible. And what we've instituted is a program where departments share that responsibility. So somebody who's not yet physically able to come back to the job that they're regularly employed by us for can have an opportunity to go do something that's less demanding physically.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And be back employed and receiving a paycheck instead of at home and receiving workers' comp.
Great.
The human services funding, we've proposed to remain flat because frankly, we just don't know what else to predict here. That's going to be fully, it'll be affected by the decisions of this board, but it'll be fully controlled at representative town meeting.
That's
and
right.
so I've referred in this paragraph to the 1% marker that has received some discussion. We know that's not actually been adopted by anybody, including representative town meeting, as a policy. But I thought it might be helpful for there to be some reference to, what does this look like in reference to that 1% marker? What it does look like if we go with flat funding through this period is the first year it's slightly larger, slightly more than 1% of the prior year's budget, and then going forward from there it is just slightly less by a little bit more each year.
Good.
Well, so why didn't you project it to be 1%?
Because that's not been adopted as a policy. It's been something that's received a fair amount of consideration, but I think it's a not yet fully resolved question, either here or at representative town meeting.
Something that really requires
Okay.
a robust discussion.
Will we get to have that discussion, or is that a town
It's a town
meeting
meeting
only
discussion.
So, here's how you have it. The town meeting committee that makes recommendations regarding these items gets to recommend what it believes is the appropriate amount of funding. You get to decide whether or not to put into the select board's recommended budget the amount that the committee is recommending. If you align, then that launches the conversation at representative town meeting and kind of more efficiently, but you don't have to align. If the sensibility of the five of you was to a different number, higher or lower than the committee, then your budget could reflect something different than the committee's recommendation.
And I think that's especially salient this year, sorry to speak out of turn again, because it just went up substantially both years in a row. So we need to think about, is there a limit
And
to this?
I also think, too, that robust discussion at town meeting stepped on the toes of, and the logic of the committee.
Yeah, well,
And we
that's,
should listen closely to what the committee has to tell us.
it's all part of the future discussion coming up.
This is
Stay
my
tuned.
favorite time of year, by the way.
Is it really?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I love
This
the
is where the rubber
leaves.
meets
The
the
leaves are
road.
nice, right?
Yeah, you can have as many like
Every Tuesday
lofty
meeting.
ideas as you want, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it comes down to the fall budget planning.
Great.
That's why I love it.
And will the Human Services Committee be coming to us
They
during the
will.
budget
Oh, yeah.
process?
Late in the process, you'll hear from them. You need, as a ministerial duty, to warn for town meeting what the committee asks you to warn.
Right.
But whether you include that same number in your budget is a decision you'll make
Okay.
near the end of the process.
All right. Sounds like fun.
It is.
It is.
And
Okay.
terrible. Yeah.
It's terribly fun.
Pardon?
He said it's,
It's fun and terrible.
He said
It's
it's
terrible
terribly fun.
decisions to make.
The ambulance expenses are projected to increase by about $50,000. That's a 20% increase over the 5-year forecast. But during this 5-year forecast, we will finish phasing out that discount that we used to receive.
Yep.
And so from, as we move forward, we're going to see increases that are much less, much smaller magnitude increases annually in the ambulance costs, unless something really significant changes in the relationship. But actually, rescues increases have been quite small lately, just a couple of %. But our budgetary cost of ambulance services has gone up quite a lot because we've been phasing out that discount.
And we got the discount because...
We got the discount because way back when, I don't know exactly when it started, but decades ago, literally 20 or 30 years ago, the town received credit for a number of different ways in which we were actually providing services to Rescue Inc. And over the years, Rescue's operation became more robust and certain things didn't make sense for the town to do it anymore and the town stopped doing it. But the discount, the sort of rate of discount stayed the same. And so there came a time 4 years or so ago when Rescue came to the town and said, you're getting a $70,000 discount compared to the other towns that are paying into the regional service. We really can't justify that anymore. We agreed with them, but to have had a, something like 40% or 50% increase in the cost of the service in 1 year would have been a terrible burden. So we asked them, how about if we phase it out $10,000 at a time over about a 6 or 7 year period, and then get to steady as we go after that. They said fine. We signed an agreement to that effect, and we're within the last 2 or 3 years of that now.
They pay property taxes in the town?
So that's interesting. When we get down to the final year, no, it's great.
You said you liked this
It's
time.
great.
I love it.
Keep it coming. No, and
Just ignore the eyebrows. I
Yeah.
can't.
and actually, so when we get done, one factor in this much more complicated discount was the property taxes that were forgiven. Okay, so that was a cost that the town absorbed, and so we got credit back for it in the discount. The understanding with Rescue is they'll probably just start paying taxes because it's simpler. But if they decide that for some reason it's beneficial to them to ask town meeting to continue their tax exemption, then they'll do that and we'll get that credited back. That'll be the only remaining credit in the future years after that would be the amount of their taxes.
Thank you, Rescue Inc., for your work. Yes.
Yes.
And also
friendly negotiation.
So they're not a nonprofit.
They are a nonprofit. Yeah, they are a nonprofit.
And their work is invaluable.
Yes.
Yes. The debt service of the town goes down a little bit
I saw that.
over time until such a time as we need to go out and borrow some more money. So right now, we don't see that on the horizon, and over the course of these 5 years, we expect the debt service to decline by about $440,000.
And when you say that, you're not referring to our water sewer future debt needs.
No, I'm not at all. Thanks
Just wanna
for that
throw that out.
clarification. I'm talking,
We may not have.
in
enough
all respects,
if
what
we
we're
save it
talking
for
about
that.
here. I'm sorry, Dave?
We may not have to borrow money for that if we're able to save enough for the rates.
Your glass is half full suddenly.
So we will have utility-related discussion later in the fall, and we do expect to have some borrowing needs there, but of a magnitude that it's going to be driven by lots of decisions, a variety of different decisions that you'll be making regarding both future rates and the magnitude of the water treatment plant project. In the meantime, everything, I should clarify, everything we're talking about in this report relates to the general fund and not to the utility fund at all. And finally, for the municipal center, because we expect that very significant changes are going to happen here at the building, but we don't yet know exactly what impact they'll have on our budget. We don't know the details yet of what we will be undertaking here. We've just, for the purposes of this report, forecasted 5 more years as if nothing was going to change.
Yep. Sounds conservative and good.
Fantastic.
Never thought you'd
Well,
hear me say those two
I was
words.
gonna say.
Yeah.
I was gonna
Mark
say.
that down as one and only time.
Thank you, that was very good.
No, you go.
A couple of comments. We haven't always had a long-term financial plan. I think this is 3 or 4 years now that it's been in place. And the finance committee, and particularly Spoon and Agave, pushed really hard for this. And obviously, Peter was very receptive and kind of outlined some goals that seemed to be really important. Obviously, the select board affirmed them, and I don't know why it didn't strike me that we might actually start to see some achieving of those goals, but there are a few things in here that were really important. I just want to point out that we're actually getting there. One of them is the continuing commitment to $1 million each year for capital projects instead of being whacked every year by, oh God, we need a grader. And then the fact that we're actually sometimes able to put more than that using surplus for that is, it's like, yeah, that's a great idea. Wouldn't it be nice if we could do that? We're actually doing it. It's really nice. I don't know why I'm surprised, because if you set out to do something, you can expect it to happen. The other is stabilizing the rate of increase of employee benefits, which is like really hard to do. And it's really there, and pensions as well. Actually reduced pensions, and now we'll see the increases, and having healthcare drive our budget increases will just put us in the same boat with everybody else that employs a lot of people. And the other thing is that the reducing the debt service payments, trying to use cash and reserves when necessary instead of borrowing. And again, it's kind of amazing that we're getting down to hardly anything left. I mean, this was millions in debt service not that long ago, or over $1 million. So I just wanted to point those things out. It's really nice to see a plan that's actually working really well.
Since David jumped in with a quick comment, I'll jump in with a very quick. I know I had a meeting with Peter where I kind of hassled you, maybe unfairly, about that level line of meals, alcohol, and rooms, and the level line of sales tax. Certainly don't begrudge you of the leveling of meals, alcohol, and rooms, because that kind of goes crazy up and down. But the sales tax, whoa.
Liz is watching the meeting on VCT at the same time as being in the meeting.
That was a little too fascinating for me, sorry.
Let me tell you the story of.
Can you see past it?
Can I tell you the story of Ken Schneck? No, I won't. You don't want to. You don't want to. So sales tax. That was the conservative projection, right? Not including internet.
That's correct.
Right.
Just want to point that out, that it's a living document, right, to some extent, so it
Oh,
could
yeah.
get tweaked going forward.
will.
That 6:30,
Yeah.
we, even though, I love the phrase, by the way, staff was not aggressively optimistic. I love that. But if you were going to be slightly aggressively optimistic,
Do you have
might,
a phrase book for those type of things?
well, I just love that phrase. I just want to so possibly that is a conservative estimate for the.
We believe it is,
Right.
but
you don't want to be.
But we just don't know.
Yeah. And I think it's
Aggressively
good to have I think we can assume all of these are probably conservative estimates at this date.
And I would
As
suggest to
stated.
you,
They should be.
from our perspective, so let me say something about the living document. Absolutely, it's an evolving document. Not quite a living document in the same way that, say, the town plan is when it's updated from time to time, or a particular budget is from the time it's proposed till the time it's adopted. The long-term plan is not meant, there's a reason why we don't ask you to adopt it, right? It's not meant to be an indication of policy. It's actually meant to be, staff's analytical snapshot of sort of where we are and where we're headed. And to help it, it's intended to help inform the policy decisions that you're gonna make and you're gonna recommend to town meeting. And because of that, it's very likely these numbers might look different next year, but I wouldn't necessarily wanna say new information, a couple of months from now might drive us to do something different here. What'll happen next year is we'll do another annual update. And if there's information available that tells us, for instance, if our wildest dreams come through and we get $1 million instead of 630, well, we're not gonna show you, 5 more years of 630,
Sure.
of course.
Right.
But if we get,
But you're not going to show us $1 million either. You're going to show us 800,000.
we'll see, I guess, we'll see what
It's not a criticism.
what the reasons are.
It's not a criticism, but anybody watching, I just wanted to say
Yeah.
that's a new item, and people are excited to see revenue coming in.
Yep.
That's not taxpayer
Absolutely.
revenue.
I think it's
And if,
So
and
I
if we
just
see
want to point
something
out
right
that-
around 630, we're likely to show you next year 5 more years of 630, even though we'll all be hopeful that the internet will bring in more revenue than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good clarifier for people watching.
It's also, we're in the 11th year of an economic growth cycle, which is, I think, probably the longest we've ever had. And it's just, counting on that is not a good idea. We need to start looking over our shoulders.
Growth for some, not for others. Anyway, it's all kickoff to budget season.
Stay tuned.
Which is an excellent segue to this next item.
There you go.
Good.
Do you guys have any?
No.
Anything else?
No. Keep losing my agenda.
So, the next item is our proposed schedule of meetings. It's just tentative at this point. Basically, what we're looking for is if it looks like you think this will work for you, we're not locking anything into stone at this point, but we'd like to start gearing towards this as we bring forward a proposed budget. We definitely will be proposing a budget about the 1st of November for presentation at the November 5th Select Board meeting. And staff is building, the applicable staff are building their calendars around these particular nights. So if you have a real substantial problem with one of these, you say, I don't think we can do a meeting that night, please call it out to us. Otherwise, we'll look at this as, the schedule of until such time as you tell us that maybe we might not need all those meetings that come after the initial presentations and discussions, but they're there for us if we need them. And for the benefit of the public, what I would say is this represents basically every Tuesday night in November, December, and January, except in that period right around the holidays. So we'd have a hiatus from December 17th to January 7th, but otherwise would be meeting every Tuesday night in November, December, and January. And on the off nights, as we refer to them, the purpose, town's done this a lot of different ways over the years. We've been in the habit of this for the last several years, and I will tell you, I think it's important that we do it. So the reason why is the public gets used to us meeting on Tuesday nights at 6:15. And by doing budget work this way, rather than, sometimes in the past it's been like take a big bite out of it on several
Sunday
hours on a
afternoon,
Saturday or
yeah.
Sunday, or even sometimes come in for, early morning meetings or lunchtime meetings. And the problem with that is those tend to be very compressed and less available to the general public. And so here at 6:15 on Tuesday nights, we come and we do our work. And on the off nights during this 3-month period, there's ample opportunity to really take that deep dive that we need to into various budget issues, because that's all we'll be doing.
And so off nights would be second and fourth Tuesdays, because on nights are the currently standing first and third Tuesdays.
That's correct. Thanks.
And on these odd nights,
Yes.
there's no executive session?
There can be if we need one. That's up to, sort of how things are flowing and your availability.
Yeah, but it's usually just straight budget items, and regular ongoing town business is, we try to save for the regular first and third Tuesdays of the month.
Exactly.
And these meetings are generally, we try to keep them shorter than.
Right.
Yes,
Sometimes
exactly.
they're very
Yeah,
short.
Always shorter.
The ones that are
They're
strictly
shorter.
budget usually are shorter. But what we also do is, on those nights, we tend to, particularly in the first half of this process, when departments are coming in to present, we pick the larger, more complicated departments to come in on those nights so that they don't have to get squeezed into a night when we've got a lot of regular town business to do.
It's also, for some reason, once it gets cold, people don't come to meetings as much.
Nobody wants to be our friend anymore.
One of the things I've been thinking about for the last several meetings, because pretty much every meeting, one person or another representing one issue or another, or one perspective or another, has said, gee, can't you schedule this a little bit earlier in the meetings, because this is really important and you leave it until real late. And when we get into this pattern of doing it every week, you just kind of pay attention to how it fits into your life, because it might be really smart for us to meet every week instead of meeting every other week and staying till 10 o'clock or later. Just something to think about. We can maybe get through our agendas more quickly, and when something big came along, not plan as many things, because next week we can pick it up. It wouldn't be a 2-week gap.
On that note, we are closing in close to 10 o'clock. I don't know how long these next few items are gonna take.
Shouldn't take long.
What's that, Franz? Yeah, go ahead, of course.
How about the utilities budget matters? How do they fit in with the schedule here?
So-
When's that going to happen?
Typically, that doesn't happen till spring. This particular year, because of the significance of the water capital work that is needed, we are planning on having a discussion in late October. The board meetings in October are the 1st and the 15th. It's a really unusual month that way. So either on the 22nd or the 29th, if the board is available, is when we were planning on actually bringing a substantial update on all of that. I will say that I'm not certain staff will be ready for that. We're working towards that still, but the reason we haven't actually set that meeting is because we're not sure that we'll be able to keep that. So if everybody can kind of have that in mind, that we're working towards October 22nd or 29th, we're hoping to have a big review of utilities that night. That would work great. If that doesn't happen, then we might need to use one of these other nights for the utilities discussion, or possibly do like a Thursday night instead of a Tuesday night or something. That wouldn't be ideal. But we want to make sure that the information is properly assembled to bring forward about that.
No, it's really important to me, the Tuesday thing, so if you need
If
more
we
time.
can,
If
right.
you can, on a Tuesday.
Absolutely. I think that works better for the public.
Would you consider doing the budget overview on the 29th of October instead of November 5th?
Oh, is that better for you?
No. I'm just trying to see how all this is gonna get.
Yeah,
That's funny.
if we run later than we hope on the utility piece, that juggle I don't think is going to help us, because the overview is pretty brief compared to a night of a deep dive into utilities. And on the 5th, when we have a regular select board meeting, that won't be a good night to take that deep dive into utilities. So, but we'll work through that. Within the next week or two, I'll know for sure whether we as staff can be ready for that utilities discussion in October. And if we can't, we'll find a way to do that, fit into this other schedule.
Sunday afternoon.
Stop it.
I like the Sunday thing. Didn't we do a Sunday thing?
I'm not doing
We did a Saturday morning
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Well, the cool thing was that everybody got to present in one day, the overview, and I think that's when we first joined the board.
Did we have pizza?
Something.
I'm not cooking.
I'll bring Smarties.
I don't want Smarties, I want pizza.
I must have completely repressed.
Smarties.
Bring Smarties, I'll bring Dum-Dums.
They were there. What about Smarties?
We're getting late.
We're getting,
All right.
I think we're getting a little busy. It's getting late, we're all getting a little
Item G
silly.
needs your action.
Yep.
Oh, good. Thanks.
So
for
item
being
G
here.
is.
Hi,
Oh,
thank you.
Or, but, yes.
Ricky, District 2, and I really do appreciate the comments about catering food to the meetings, though, because food for thought is very important, and I would appreciate healthy catering because we're making budget decisions that are affecting people's lives directly in the future, and we should be eating healthier food than pizza and candy.
Sorry, Ricky.
Don't be sorry.
That's my stress love.
We just need to make bids to catering companies. Like I would recommend either Super Fresh or like the Indian cuisine options. I heard that Dan Yates likes the Vermont table.
Yes, he
and
does.
with the Porch Deli.
Porch too.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Yep. I hope Dan was watching for that. Thanks, Ricky.
Whatever.
Okay, so we're moving to item G, which does require action, which is VTRANS 2019 Bicycle and Pedestrian Grant Program. Peter?
Yes, so we've talked briefly before about the suggestion that's been made to the town that we create a bike lane on Western Avenue between down on the east, it would come potentially all the way to Main Street or potentially just to around the Cedar and Spruce area, but then go on the western side out to exit 2. I want to reassure anybody who might still be hanging in there with us tonight that there is going to be a robust public engagement process around this. All we're asking for tonight is for you to accept and appropriate the grant, which is a $32,000 grant from the Bicycle and Pedestrian Program of the Vermont Agency of Transportation. This will fund our hiring of a consultant who will lead us through the scoping study and the public engagement, which ultimately will then make a recommendation of whether and if so how we might move forward with a bike lane.
Excellent, thank you for that clarification, Peter.
Are we ready for a motion?
I think let's get the money.
Oh, wait.
We're just getting the money.
Yeah. I just wanted to
Yeah.
bring up, sorry,
Yeah.
I'm super dismissive sometimes. Bicycles, Brattleboro, this weekend, we have the Better Block Challenge.
Yes.
Which will have a temporary bike lane on Flat Street between Elliott Street and the Preston Lot.
Good point.
From Saturday through to the end of Sunday.
That
And
sounds
that's like a good way to test
Yeah.
bike lanes in this town, right?
Wait, like,
There's actually a window of time each of the 2 days. It won't stay in place overnight for safety reasons, sorry. But there is a long window on Saturday and a shorter window on Sunday, both in the
Are you gonna go?
morning into the afternoon hours.
And the other planning elements
Yes.
are in evidence, and it's also Friday night, but not the bike lane.
Yes,
Not the bike
Correct.
you have to bike unsafely outside of those other times.
Or just a
Ooh,
little
that's-
extra carefully
that's-
without
I'll
the
be riding my
government's
bike
help.
home after this. Please be careful, drivers.
We would be remiss if we didn't say how sustainable this action is.
I agree with that.
True.
Yep.
So should we make?
Yeah, somebody make a motion.
I move we accept and appropriate a grant in the amount of $32,000 from the Vermont Agency of Transportation for a scoping study for a bicycle lane along Route 9 from the intersection of Main and High Streets to the exit 2 interchange.
Excellent. David has made the motion to get this money. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, our next item is the reappointment of a deputy town health officer.
So earlier this year, when we were creating the registration and inspection program for rental housing, we actually spent quite a bit more time talking about how the health officer work occurs in town than we normally have in the past. And you know from those discussions that along with Health Officer Leonard Howard, we have several deputy health officers who work in various areas of expertise across the town government. One of whom is Brian Bannon, who does a really excellent job of addressing ordinance violations of primarily land use, but not exclusively land use type. These are things that are related to, but not always directly part of his zoning administrator responsibilities. And he's really attentive to those. Some of them are pretty gnarly situations where, he'll work with an owner and get a situation cleaned up, and then it recurs again, a month or two later, and you start the process all over again. It takes a lot of perseverance. He's good at that, and his 3-year appointment has come due. So the way this works under Dylan's rule is the state actually makes the appointment of these local officials to be health officers and deputy health officers. They seek the select board's recommendation of whom to appoint. So we're asking you tonight to recommend to the state that Brian be reappointed as deputy health officer.
Well, I can't make the motion, but having worked with Brian, I highly make the recommendation. If somebody else wants to make the motion?
I'd be happy to make the motion.
I think Ricky wanted to
Ricky.
say something.
Hi, I'm Ricky, District 2, and I feel disappointed by the appointing process in general. I would encourage considering the town health officer to be another elected position, and that I feel personally disappointed by how the issues that I've brought that he would be responsible for, he hasn't really responded to me with. I have never heard any updates from him about what my concerns were. So,
Thank you.
Okay, I recommend to the Vermont Department, I recommend that the board recommend to the Vermont Department of Health the reappointment of zoning administrator Brian Bannon as deputy health officer.
Okay, Liz has made that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We move to committee appointments. And we are appointing tonight to the Town Arts Committee and the Town Energy Committee.
Write it down.
Okay, so who would like to make a nomination for the Arts, or who would like to read the slate?
I'll read the slate.
Great.
There's one vacancy for the Arts Committee, and the applicant is Kate Richardson. And I will nominate her, I believe. And for the Energy Committee, there are 3 vacancies and 2 applicants, Tony Duncan for a 1-year term and Rick Foley for a 2-year term.
Excellent. Tim has made the nomination to move the slate for the Arts Committee, being 1 vacancy, Kate Richardson, and the Energy Committee being 3 vacancies with Tony Duncan for a 1-year term, Rick Foley for a 2-year term. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries, and I'd like to note that that does leave a vacancy. We're always looking for applicants. That's all we have tonight for business, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourns. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry about
It was unnecessary. I think it's just long.
As long as it had to be.